Welcome everyone to Comics from the Multiverse, episode 227. I am Peter, and joining me, unfortunately, still on his own, is Connor.
Yep, I'm still here.
There's a feeling of despair. You saying I'm still here just fills me with this existential kind of dread. Like, the universe is a cold and empty place, and nothing's ever going to go our way. And we should just
I agree, and
expect our demise.
that's why Aberfeldy will fix that for me.
Yes. You couldn't even mute the mic while you were...
Nah.
Okay, Connor's just handling booze. That's how we're starting the show. It's a DC Comics podcast. We talk about DC Comics every week, and coming up on this week's show, we'll be discussing Justice League 56, which was actually from last week, but catching up on that first. We also have Dark Knight's Death Metal Infinite Hour Exxxtreme issue 1. Plus, we got Punchline issue 1 special. We got Superman 27, Wonder Woman 766, The Flash 765, Hawkman 29, and I have one Patreon book as well, an American Vampire 13. So that is what's coming up on this week's show. But of course, also, it's Solicits week. As we've been saying though, since last month's Solicits is probably pretty boring Solicits. However, I have not looked at them at all. So if there's any surprises, then...
There's one or two things of note. I had a skim through them the other day.
Yesterday.
There is... Was it only yesterday? Jesus Christ, this week has been so long. Then yes, I looked through them yesterday. One or two things of note, I guess.
Yeah, because I'm just kind of expecting issue 2s, or in some cases issue 3s and 4s of things that they announced last time, but we'll see. A couple of little news tidbits to go on to the back of that as well. So without further ado, I think we'll just dive straight into the Solicits this week, get going through them. And for some reason, just like last month, they're all split into various families of books for whatever reason. We'll start off with the Batman family of books. We'll get going with this. So, Future State, the next Batman, issue 3. Yep. As we'd expect, same with issue 4. Not really much to say. It is kind of what we expected in that these stories, there's the main story that's in all 4 issues, but then the 2 backups, issue 1 and 3 has parts 1 and 2 of those, issue 3 and 4, or issue 2 and 4 has parts 1 and 2 of the other couple.
Yeah, that's pretty much just a direct continuation of what we had last month for those issues. So,
honestly, this may be a relatively boring Solicits talk. This might just be me listing the books again, but...
There's a few little things here or there sprinkled throughout.
Well, Future State, Batman Superman issue 2. That's the Jean Lin Yang book. We have Future State, Catwoman issue... Look, I'm just... For reference, everything from this point forward, unless I say otherwise, has the word Future State at the start of the title.
I'd say not even until you say otherwise, because there is a section at the end that is the non-Future State stuff.
When we get out of the Future State stuff, sure, obviously it changes, but until I say otherwise, yes, everything has Future State at the start of the title. It's Catwoman issue 2, that's Ram V on that. We got Future State Dark Detective issue 3 and issue 4. The main story in that being by Tamaki. I'm just sort of saying the main story to remind everyone what each one of these is.
Yeah, I like how at the end of the last book there with Catwoman, you were like, I'm not going to say Future State in front of every single one. And then immediately on that one, you went Future State Dark Detective.
Okay, well, in my defense, it's because Catwoman's already just a book title, whereas Dark Detective's unique to this thing. So, look, Future State might be said intermittently if my tongue just happens to go there, but sometimes I might not. So therefore, just roll with the punches, basically. And then we got Harley Quinn issue 2. That's Stephanie Phillips writing that one. Nightwing issue 2. Andrew Constant writing that one. Robin Eternal issue 2. I don't even remember this one. Okay, Robin Eternal. By Megan Fitzmartin. And that's the Bat books. Well, that was quick.
Before you move on, Newsarama did a little here's the bullet points at the top of interesting highlights in case you don't want to read through the text of all of those solicits, which I get why you wouldn't. And there's one thing that I don't know if they know something that we don't, and maybe we've missed. Because in one of their points, they say, in his concluding solo title, Nightwing teams with the next Batman. And I'm like, now I know this is only a 2-issue thing, and technically, yes, this is concluding because it won't be Future State Nightwing or whatever they called it after this. Yeah, but I'm assuming the Nightwing book itself wasn't cancelled, was it?
I don't think it is. I think this is just their phrasing that maybe you're reading into a little bit much.
Oh, maybe it was just they literally said in his concluding solo title. That's I don't know.
It's just the phrasing they want to use to make it sound different at the start of the sentence. It's just in his concluding solo title, meaning his future state book.
Maybe, but I feel like they should have worded that better.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that sentence. I think this is you reading into it too much. Now, and even if like we come back after Future State and Nightwing's been cancelled, I still don't think this was them knowing that.
Maybe not. No.
So, yeah. So there you go. Also, Tim Drake's dying apparently. I just read that at the end of it.
Onomatopoeia from Kevin Smith's Green Arrow stuff is showing up in Catwoman, I think, which should be fun. He's a fun villain.
Don't worry, I'm sure it's not going to stick for anyone who's panicking.
Yes. I'm sure everything that matters in this crazy alternate future matters so much.
See, Newsarama's setting the structures better than yours. Used everything that matters in this future matters so much. That's pure English. All right. Moving on to the Superman.
I said everything that happens in this future. I'm
sure you said matters. No instant replays. We don't do rewinds to find out who was right here. We just assume I'm right and move on. But I'm sure you said matters.
The comments will prove me right, I'm sure.
All right, so Superman books. We got Superman House of L issue... Wait, 1?
Yeah, this is a new one. And it's Old Man Superman.
Oh, so that's just a one-shot, I assume, then. Yeah. Yeah, this is oversized, $6 for 8 pages. Yeah, fair enough. This is Philip Kennedy Johnson writing with Scott Goodluski on the art.
Yeah, and it's set centuries in the future.
Okay. Interesting. We got Immortal Wonder Woman issue 2. Was the Wonder Woman book in the Superman family last time?
It was either in the Superman family or it was in the Justice League family. I can't remember.
I would expect it to be in the Justice League family, but I'm more critiquing the Solicits presentation by Newsarama / DC here than I am the books themselves, admittedly, at this point. But
yeah, I mean, I'm sure this was the way they were given to Newsarama from DC. They were given them section by section because these were released steadily throughout the day, and then here's the quote-unquote full Solicits at the end, which is kind of normal from what we see with DC Solicits anyway. It's just that Newsarama decided to be lazy these last couple of months and not actually compile them into a full Solicits at the end like they usually do.
So yeah, Immortal Wonder Woman issue 2. This is the Michael Conrad, Becky Cloonan story.
Yes, this is the one with
anyway.
Diana still.
Yes, and then we got Kara Zor-El Superwoman issue 2. This is Margaret Bennett. Very intrigued by that one. Legion of Superheroes issue 2. That's the Bendis and Rosmo, which I've got a sneaking suspicion that Connor may have to end up reading. Just a hunch.
I'm ill those months.
And then we got Superman of Metropolis issue 2. Main story by Sean Lewis, and then some other ones as well. So again, it's one of these oversized ones with the backups. And we got Superman versus Imperious Lex issue 2. This is the Mark Russell one. So that's wrapping. Oh, sorry, and issue 3. So that is wrapping up.
Although issue 3 is coming out in March, I believe.
Yes. The end of March, in fact. So that's interesting. There's 1 or 2 books that are going to sprinkle into March.
Yeah, I could be wrong. I believe this is the only one that we know of. But yeah, it is interesting that it's just this weird holdover book.
I wonder if it's just they couldn't get them done in time, so the third one just has to be later. They just have to deal with it. That might be the reason, or there could be a story reason. Maybe it'll tie into something that's going to happen in one of the main books. You know, some sort of multiversal shenanigans or something. And then we got Superman Worlds of War issue 2. That's the Philip Kennedy Johnson main story. Superman, War World, all that stuff. Then we got Superman Wonder Woman issue 2. That's the Dan Waters written book. We got Wonder Woman issue 2. This is the new Wonder Woman, of course. This is the J.L. Jones one. And that wraps up the Superman family. I guess because Superman Wonder Woman exists, they wanted to put the Wonder Woman books with Superman.
I guess once you have to include that one in the Superman family, you might as well throw the other one in.
There's the Justice League hanging a little bit, but...
Yeah, but they've got like Green Lanterns and Flashes and whatever else that it's got.
Well, Aquaman to begin with. Aquaman issue 2.
Well,
Brandon Thomas writing. Then Flash issue 2. Brandon Vietti writing. Then Green Lantern issue 2, which is Jeffrey Thorne, the main story. That's the anthology treatment now. And then Justice League issue 2. Joshua Williamson on the main story. Again, backups like the previous month. And I am going through these quickly. The reason why I'm going through these quickly, again, just in case anyone's wondering why I'm speeding through these without mentioning artists, is because it's all the same teams from the last month. It's just the same thing again.
It's not that interesting.
No. Shazam issue 2. This is the Tim Sheridan written story. And then Suicide Squad issue 2 is Robbie Thompson on the main story with Jeremy Adams on the Black Adam backup. Swamp Thing issue 2 is next. Ram V, Mike Perkins. Kind of looking forward to that.
Stuff. Yeah.
Teen Titans issue 2, Tim Sheridan, and that wraps up the Justice League. And to be honest, Justice League might as well just be named rest of the DCU.
Yeah.
Because Swamp Thing and Teen Titans, I wouldn't really consider, or even Suicide Squad, now that I'm scrolling up to see more of them. Like, the first batch of them, sure, those are Justice League characters. The last half of them, they're just other DC characters.
I mean, Teen Titans, you can maybe make an argument that they're in place of Young Justice. They're the younger Justice League right now. And I'm like, okay, sure, I could maybe buy that argument. The others are definitely a stretch. Although I guess Swamp Thing is on Justice League Dark. So, I mean, who knows?
This is a stretch. But then we get to the non-future state stuff. So we're into just whatever else happens to be coming out, Black Label stuff, a couple other random things. So let's work through these. Arguably, maybe the most interesting stuff this solicits, just because it's not the predictable to the same extent as the future state wrap-ups. So first up, we have one of these big 80-page one-shots. I mean, it is February. They'll have to do a Valentine's, love-themed special anthology. So this is no different this year. We got DC Love is a Battlefield issue 1 with stories by Cavan Scott, Andrew Wheeler, Crystal Fraser, and Regine Sawyer. And I have to admit, I don't think I know any of those writers.
I know Cavan Scott. Pretty sure I do anyway, if it's who I'm thinking of. I think, if it's the person I'm thinking of, does a lot of like young adult Star Wars stuff. I think he's working on the new High Republic stuff as well, and might actually be writing the main High Republic comic for Marvel that's starting in like January. If I'm thinking of the right person, I think I am. But that's the only one I am familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, we typically skip these just because they tend to be these big books that are fairly irrelevant, and and if they're on a quiet week, sure, we may have a look at them, but for the most part, they end up being on a week with those 10 other books, and it's like, well, the 80-page thing that's not in continuity can probably just stay over there and be its own thing. But more interesting, though, I think, is Generations Forged issue 1. And this is an 80-page one-shot. But unlike that, this seems a lot more relevant to our interests.
Yeah, so, obviously we had Generations Shattered, I believe it was,
yes.
In January.
So yeah, this would kind of be it says Forged, but I would argue maybe Reforging is perhaps a better descriptor, given that the previous one's called Shattered. So we've got stories in here by Dan Jurgens, Andy Schmidt, and Robert Venditti. Art by Brian Hitch, Mike Perkins, Bernard Chang, Paul Pelletier, and others. So I imagine they've not finalized everyone yet. So I'll read the description for this one, though, because this obviously is very intriguing, given what this is. Dispersed through time by the villain Dominus, a ragtag team of generational heroes featuring 1939 Batman, Kamandi, Superboy, Steel, Starfire, Sinestro, Booster Gold, and Dr. Light must find a way to restore the timeline. And what they ultimately discover is something far, far greater. You have to read it to believe, as time dies and generations rise. So, yeah, obviously, unlike the Random Love Anthology, this is a bit more pertinent to our interests as far as the DC Universe is concerned. So this is definitely something we'll be looking at.
Yeah, and I'll fill in for Matt a little bit here in that Dominus as a villain exists in DC history already.
I'm not surprised.
Interestingly, though, is the main villain of a story arc from the late 90s called The Dominus Effect in Superman, written by Dan Jurgens, and it was about like the breaking of some realities and multiple Supermen.
Interesting. I'm very I mean, this might end up just being like a standalone thing to sort of pull in some of those generation ideas they had and just put them as a couple of big one shots, and that may be all it is, and that's fine.
Yeah, and it's weird because where was it we got the first Generations tease recently? It was in one of the anthologies recently, right?
Yeah, it said to be continued in Generations Future State.
Yes, which DC have now confirmed they are just completely separate things. That there isn't going to be a Generations Future State. It will just be continued in these Generations one shots,
which I don't think is a problem in and of itself. It's just kind of weird that they seem to be connected at some point and then they change their minds and now they're not connected. That's just, it feels messy.
Right. It does. So we've had that in a published comic means that it was clearly the plan at some point fairly late along the way, right?
Maybe they looked at it and went, you know what? The connection between these two things is fairly tangential at best. Maybe it would be actually better for both just to say, no, clean break, this is this thing, this is that thing, move on.
Quite possibly.
So it may be a good creative choice ultimately, but it does feel messy in the run up to it. We'll just have to see how it turns out to have any sort of proper opinion. Also kind of interesting here is we get Man-Bat issue 1. So you might remember there was a 5-issue Man-Bat series that was supposed to come out last summer, something like that.
It was solicited before the break, from what I recall. We had like the first one or two issues solicited, maybe 3.
When I say last summer, I mean this past summer. I don't mean
summer just gone.
Yeah, I realized last summer kind of sounded like I meant last year. And it kind of got taken off to Solicits, and it was one of those things where they were kind of like taking a lot of things off the schedule to like minimize it during the the first sort of lockdown and pandemic, and everything was sort of dying down for a bit. This was one of the casualties, and we didn't really know if it was ever going to pop back up again. But yeah, the 5-issue Man-Bat miniseries by Dave Wielgosz and Sumit Kumar. Now, admittedly, I don't remember if those were the same creative names from the first time, just from memory.
I think they are. Kumar definitely sounds familiar to me.
Yeah. I assume they probably are, but if anything has changed here in terms of creative, feel free to let us know. But yeah, so it's nice to see it back. I was always intrigued by the idea of a Man-Bat mini. So
yeah, we were all very open to this, right? And honestly, the fact that it actually says resolicit in the information here tells me it must be the same team.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
because it'll be the exact same information. So I mean, it's kind of not excited to talk about in that sense that there's no new information here, but it's finally coming out. It's because it was officially put on indefinite hold when they were asked about it after everything came back, and it was just missing from like the next 2 or 3 months of solicits. So nice to know we're finally going to see it. I'm assuming it's all finished as well, so there won't be any delays.
Yeah, very possibly. Next up, here's something else. We got Truth and Justice issue 1. This is a digital first book, but it is a 40-page, $5 digital first book. That's interesting.
I'm assuming, I could be wrong here, I'm assuming this is just the collection of the 4 or 5 chapters, whatever it's going to be digitally.
Yeah, you may be right here. This is Jeffrey Thorne writing with art by Chris Cross and Jordi Tarragona, and it's a Vixen story. So,
a Vixen team up, I believe. It's kind of the premise.
So, very interesting. And that's kind of it for the issue. Actually, where's the Black Label stuff? Is that just further down? Because
it'll be further down, yeah.
Okay, there's a bunch of trades, yada yada. Here we go. American Vampire 1976 issue 5. No surprise there. Batman Black and White issue 3. I have to admit, I'd forgotten they were doing this again. It's because we've not had any of the issues yet, so it's like for the first 3 issues when they're solicited, I keep forgetting sometimes what's
I do that with a lot of books.
Once I've read one, it's like, okay, this exists, it's in my brain, it's cemented, I know where it is.
I'm still looking forward to this because there's a lot of high-profile creative teams.
Oh yeah, you got Evely in there, Seeley. Yeah, so that's an interesting
got, John Ridley doing a story with Coipel again. Yeah, hard to complain about any of the people on this book. Bengal, who I'm a big fan of.
So, yeah, very, very intriguing. You got White Knight presents Harley Quinn issue 5, so that's still ticking. Batman Catwoman issue 3, of course, that's, again, I mean, obviously this one's a bit more cemented in my head because we've been waiting on it for forever.
So it's kind of become a bit infamous.
But yeah, so issue 3 that's coming out in February. I'm looking forward to seeing how the Phantasm stuff gets put in there.
I'm more intrigued than I am excited. I'll be honest.
That's fine. There has to be a bad cop. You can be bad cop. Dreaming Waking Hours issue 7. We got Far Sector issue 10. That book is taking so long to get finished.
Frankly, that'll be the real reason why you haven't had more Naomi solicited yet. Because correct me if I'm wrong, Bendis did say he was waiting until Campbell was free. So after this book, I imagine that'll be his next project.
You would hope so. If there's like another mini before that, oh my god, like the wait between Naomi seasons is ridiculous.
I hope so for your sake as well, frankly, because
dear.
I get it. I get the frustration with those waits, but at the same time, I'm actually liking Far Sector, so I'm quite happy that they're letting him just do his thing. And hey, if it takes time, get it done. Yeah,
Green Lantern season 2 issue 11 is out, which is not a Black Label book. It's just bundled with them because there's nowhere else to put it in this month's solicits. Rorschach issue 5, that's still going. Good stuff. I like the cover of that one actually. Rorschach in the rain. Pretty.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous cover. Both covers are really nice, actually, to be honest.
Yeah, the other one's very minimalistic. It's basically your kind of Apocalypse Now cover, but just with the silhouette of a giant Manhattan walking past the sun.
Yeah, that's the regular cover, actually. That one that you talk about. The more Watchmen-y cover is the variant.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, if they've got both, typically they show the variant first on these solicits. That's pretty much just the standard thing.
Yeah, it's a weird choice.
You got your other random things like Scooby-Doo, Where Are You 108. Sweet Tooth The Return issue 4. And then we're into some more trades and hardcovers.
Yeah, I'm a bit disappointed. The first one here is a Death Metal Deluxe Edition. The disappointing thing is it is literally just Death Metal 1 to 7. Doesn't include even like the Multiverse End one shot. Nothing.
That's a wait for an omnibus, I'd say. Unless you haven't read it and you just wait for trades to read things and you're going to pick up all the books, then fair enough. But I think if you're waiting for the Ultimate Collection, you're going to have to wait for the omnibus at some point.
Does seem that way. And it's a shame, because if it had been just a regular hardcover, I could have gone, okay, but this is a deluxe, oversized one.
Now, I've not been paying attention to the regular trades in a while, so I could be wrong here, but Batgirl Volume 8, the Joker War hardcover, which is 45 to 50, which, to be honest, is kind of a weird collection, because I don't know if even all of that was Joker War related, other than the last couple, but it's a hardcover. For some reason, I didn't think that was releasing in hardcover first, but I could be completely wrong there. Maybe they've all been releasing hardcover first, but
it wasn't at the start of Rebirth, I can tell you that, because I picked up a couple in paperback.
Really, there you go. So that's an annoying choice, my consistency. But meaning, if you've been collecting the paperbacks and you want the paperback to, have a matching set, you're waiting an extra 6 months or whatever after that comes out to get that. That kind of sucks. I guess it's all the Joker War books. Yeah, they're all hardcovers. Nightwings is a hardcover. Detective Comics is a hardcover.
That's shitty.
Yeah,
I mean, Detective Comics is probably hardcover anyway. Let's be honest. But Nightwing,
actually, no. I don't. No, now that I'm thinking about it, all the Rebirth books were all paperback first. The only exceptions, were when they did like a crossover. So I think like Justice League versus Suicide Squad was hardcover, but everything was paperback first, and then the deluxe hardcovers like a year later.
Yeah, I've got some of the deluxe hardcovers. I kind of waited on those because I tend to not buy a lot of paperbacks anymore.
I think like Bendis' Superman changed it, and that was hardcover first. But I don't know if anything else changed along the way. But it was definitely all paperback first.
I guess I don't mind it as much if it changed when it was okay. A new team's taking over, so we're switching to hardcover first. It's a little bit frustrating if you don't care and you just want to keep collecting. Don't get me wrong, that is frustrating. But at least there's a reason, and a lot of the times they actually renumber those anyway. I'm surprised they didn't with Batgirl, to be honest. But
it's because all the runs were too short after the first one. None of them lasted long enough to feel like, we can actually renumber this as a new series kind of thing.
That's true.
Because ultimately they all ended up being about 2 trades worth each, which is a shame.
I think the first one was only about 3. Something like 18 issues, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that. It was. No, I went up to like 25, I think, because I think the new writer took over at 25, if I remember right.
Oh, maybe then. Maybe I'm misremembering.
So maybe 24, maybe they stopped. Maybe Hope Larson stopped an issue before.
Yeah.
which would typically be 4 trades, unless
yes.
unless they had like a weird, issue count in some of them. But yeah, that's basically it. There's a Flashpoint omnibus coming if anyone wants to get the whole shebang of that.
Is it really the whole shebang? Yeah, I haven't looked at that one.
I mean, it looks like it's all the minis just from glancing at it. I haven't read through it to double check from a list, but
I'm just scanning them. The deceased trade, because obviously I think they must have come out hardcover, but the paperback, it does include the Good Day to Die one shot as well, which I appreciate, because
that's good.
I mean, there's nowhere else to collect it, but at the same time, it feels like it's less essential, right?
What's interesting is that Flashpoint omnibus is another one of their 1,500-page books, and it's just a little bit too thick. And I get that it's annoying having to either put 2 smaller books in a slipcase or release it as 2 parts, which is especially in an event like that where it doesn't really feel like it's the natural splitting point for the 2 of them.
Where do you split that? And then you've got people kind of going like, I want to read the whole story in one thing, and you got to wait a year for the next volume.
Yeah, what they really should do is do the Dark Tower thing that Marvel did, where they just put 2 reasonably sized omnibuses in a slipcover and sell it as a thing.
And DC have done slipcover books before like that.
Yeah, that's really what they should do. Because I had 1 or 2. I think it was Johnsy's Teen Titans one that I never get around to reading before I sold my physical books off. But like it was it was unbelievably wieldy. I loved an omnibus, but some of them were just a little bit too thick. Okay, that's pretty much the solicits. Yeah, there's some more trades and stuff, but
I don't think there's anything really else of interest. I'm just scanning just to see if anything jumps out, but I don't think so.
Nah.
No, I think we're good.
Who's Who Omnibus Volume 1?
I don't even know what that is supposed to be.
Or do I? It's 1,300 pages.
The series fans demanded is collected at last.
The definitive directory of the DC Universe Volume 1. I mean, it's not the actual cover of the omnibus, but I assume this is a cover from the original run.
It looks like a nice contents page, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm assuming this is some kind of like each character gets a page with some backstory. It's more of an encyclopedia than it is a traditional comic book. Right, that's a lot of pages though for something like that. So
it is, because that was 26 issues, and then it's got material from a whole bunch of other bits and pieces as well.
Is this just a 1,300-page Secret Files?
I think it kind of is.
Yeah, all right, okay, interesting. Some long-time fans can fill us in. So we got some other news to sort of mention. One of these, it's kind of big and it kind of isn't at the same time. It's big in that we have a new editor-in-chief, but it's not super exciting in the sense that it's just one of the 2 people who were acting editor-in-chief for the last few months. It's not some, it's just not like they've got some new hotshot name that we've not heard until now.
Yeah, I think the most interesting part of that announcement is that she is going to be reporting directly to, I can't remember the name, the new general manager that they hired in the last couple of months, not Jim Lee. So Jim Lee is essentially cut out of that editorial loop now, which might have its own ramifications going forward.
It's hard to say if that's good or bad. On the one hand, like maybe lightening his load a little bit may actually be good for the other stuff that he has to do, because Jim Lee's main role now is, I think so, because he's kind of took over Johns's role, which is to kind of be the glue between DC Comics as itself as a comic publisher and then the movie side of things, the TV side of things, like all the other cross promotion things. And
I think one of the unspoken things of his role that has become more and more true as the years have gone on is the public face as well. He is very much who most people associate as not necessarily the head of DC, but he's the one that you look to with questions from a public perspective.
He's the one who comes out and talks. Yeah, it's worth mentioning though, the editor-in-chief, like this is not what him and Didio were. They were the publishers. Editor-in-chief was Bob Harassi's role. So
yes, but their chain, so Bob Harass went to the publishers essentially. So they had like this relationship where they could kind of veto ideas and such, whereas that won't be the case. Jim Lee will have essentially less power now in terms of the comic book publishing, which might be bad if you like his work on that, but like I say, it might be good in terms of it'll give him a chance to focus on his other side of his roles.
I don't have any ill will towards Jim Lee, but I have to say that having no one who was in power for the New 52 in the new kind of structure is actually kind of appealing. I mean, it might actually end up being terrible and worse than anything we've ever had before, but there's the potential that this is actually a nice fresh break and new creative minds driving in us in new directions that might actually end up being more focused. Now, admittedly, if the corporate side of things keeps kind of like tinkering and interfering and saying, don't do that, do this, don't do that, then it may not make a difference anyway, but there's a potential, at least.
On the same day that this was announced, something like another 15 layoffs also happened in the editorial staff.
Okay, I think that's just an unfortunate side effect of all the restructuring going on.
It is. But again, it seems to be targeting those higher up on the chain, the ones who cost more, essentially. The downside to that is we're losing a lot of experienced people on that side, and that might have concerning ramifications down the line. It's not like an immediate, oh no, everything's going to implode. More just they're gonna, they have their own connections, they have their own things that they bring, that they know everyone, and I mean. You could argue we're maybe even seeing some of that with the Jeff Johns news this week, which is him and Gary Frank.
I've got it separately.
Okay, I think it ties into this particular story, though, in that their new creator-owned book is no longer a DC published book like it was originally announced that it was going to be. It was going to be under Johns' Killing Zone, I want to say it was called, imprint that he was going to be doing, that was kind of announced before Black Label kind of just swallowed everything. And now, now it's not. And I do wonder if part of that is, the editors that he wanted to be working with and such aren't there anymore.
Maybe. Honestly, that's been so long coming. I have no idea if it even has anything to do with what's going on right now. It may be something that's been bubbling there for a long time as far as Johns' relationship with DC goes. And not even just his relationship with DC. That sounds like it maybe is strained. And I don't know if it is. Maybe it is. But I think it's more to do with the idea of DC doing more little imprints and stuff like that. I don't know if they're that interested in doing that and have been for a while.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously they did Hill House not that long ago that seemed to definitely was critically very well received. I don't know how well it sold. It seemed reasonable enough, but maybe they're just not interested in it anymore.
It depends what you define as reasonable. But the point is, though, is that so many people have changed the positions since that was greenlit that, I'm not so sure that there is any interest in doing more imprinty things like that. It makes me kind of pessimistic as to getting new Hill House books at some point, a second wave of books.
It's a weird one because I don't want to be too worried that we haven't been hearing announcements, because we were flat out told we won't even announce them until the whole book is finished and ready to publish, because we don't want to worry about any delays. So it's the sort of thing where I was expecting a long wait before hearing about any anyway.
Yeah, but then they may just never be announced, and we'll just forget they ever said that.
That's very true. Yep, could absolutely happen.
So now, someone's got a position. At least that makes it feel a bit more structured.
Real.
We'll see if it actually results in any sort of notable change, or we feel an impact in the books. It's been kind of up in the air for the last few months, though. So if there's even just a sense of direction or a sense of a steadying hand, and you wouldn't feel it immediately. It'll take a couple of months for it to start to feel like it's there. But if that does sort of come to fruition, then we'll maybe feel a bit of a stabilizing happening. But we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
There's all sorts of rumors flying around right now that I don't want to give too much credence to. So many going around. About March and stuff in specific. That there's just no point. We'll have to wait and see what actually happens in the Solicits come March.
I'll just say I think most of them are nonsense, and
I do as well, which is why I'm not even bringing them up for proper discussion.
So that is that, and that's basically it. You had a couple of delays you wanted to mention.
Yeah, one is the obligatory Amethyst delayed again. I don't know how much longer this is because the Newsarama's terrible formatting, like you pointed out last time. It's now 12 weeks from the original date. It's now December 15th.
I think That's only like 1 week more. I don't think that's
yeah, it's only 1 or 2. It was definitely December last time, so it's only 1 or 2 weeks more than whatever it was. The other one is maybe a little bit more interesting, especially given some other rumors that came out later in the week, because this came out 5 days ago now as we're recording this news story, in that the Wonder Woman 1984 variants are no longer coming out in December. They were always meant to come out to time with the film. They kept delaying them to time with the film, and now they're coming out. They haven't even, I don't think they've said exactly when, just sometime in 2021. And they're saying it's to tie in with Wonder Woman's 80th anniversary year, which is next year. But you can't help but wonder, is this a sign that the film's going to slip? And but they have to tell retailers about these covers within a certain amount of time frame. Because obviously when the orders happen. And then there was rumors later in the week that the movie might either still come out in December, or Christmas Day as it was planned, and then go to HBO Max in January, or it was going to look at delaying to spring or summer and do a proper theatrical release then. So I don't know. This kind of just is interesting that maybe they are looking at delaying it again.
I don't think it's interesting at all. Delays to the movie at this point are non-news. If anything, the news is when we go by a week and there's not a delay.
That's fair. I can't really argue with that. But I think it was more interesting that this was the way that sparked maybe there's a delay coming in, rather than anything from the movie side of things.
I don't think the comics have any sort of... Honestly, if anything, to me, all this says is that they've given up trying to line it up, and they're just going to use this other anniversary as an excuse to just have a concrete date for them that won't change. Yeah. Although I would expect, if anything, if they're going to do a big 80-page, 100-page, Wonder Woman special to celebrate the 80th, then just make them all variants for that. They're all just variants for that special.
All variants for that special.
Yes.
Jesus, they've got so many variants already for this. There's probably like 20 odd of them.
Just do that. There you go. You just do that, and then get Nicola Scott in to do her lineup. I'm sure I did it for the Wonder Woman 750.
Yeah.
Well, she could do it. Maybe she could do it for like the villains or something. She could put in like Cheetah through the years for the 80th anniversary special.
Giving that poor woman more work to do.
She's very good at it.
She is very good at it. I agree. I did quite enjoy the Nightwing one as well that she did.
She's this is her thing now. She does these lineup covers for these specials.
It is kind of funny how they started as like a store exclusive cover. I think the first one was like for some Australian store. And then now they're just like, no, they're a thing that she does on all of these specials now. That are like the full blown that anyone can get.
Now we just need to get her on the what do we call them? Cold Snap special. I need to see Cold Snap throughout the years. He must be hitting like 30 years by now. I don't know.
I mean, he probably is, but he must only have at most 2 different looks.
I refuse to believe that.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'm doing some valuable research.
You're Googling Cold Snap.
I want to know when he was invented.
Oh, God.
He debuted in Batman, or just the Outsiders, issue 9?
When was that?
First appearance. No, it's actually it's a Suicide issue. Okay, the Google result lied to me, but DC Wiki's got my back. Suicide Squad Volume 4, Issue 30, which was 2014.
Was that it?
He's only 6 years old. So when I saw him in Justice League, he was only 2 years old at that point.
He was the hot new thing they were trying to make happen still.
Oh, not hot. Let's get the terminology right here.
It was very intentional.
The cool new thing, I think you'll find, was what they were going for.
He wishes he was the cool new thing.
Cold Snap's only 6 years old, damn it. He's younger than my cats. Like, what the hell? What is this nonsense? Okay, that's news. We're done. News is finished. Alright, books. Justice League... Oh yes, thank you for interrupting me.
No, there was clearly a bit of a delay going on because it didn't sound like I was interrupting from my end.
Justice League 56, Joshua Williamson writing with Robson Rocha on the art. This is a book from last week, of course. Now, I wouldn't necessarily put this first, but it does actually get slightly referenced in the one-shot that we did this week, so I put it in front of it, just for, neatness sake. So this is, of course, the next part of the tie-in arc. The previous issue ended with seemingly all of the members of the Titans / Justice League dying in a big blast from the Omega Knight. And then this issue, and I thought it was fine at first because it was like Nightwing was the only survivor, and he's kind of like holding, he's like, oh, okay, if you're going to kill me too, just do it. But then like, everyone's just kind of fine as the issue goes on. It's like, oh, they all survived somehow. Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of underwhelming in that sense.
To be fair, I actually think this might be the best issue of the arc, but I am going to criticize that element of it.
No, I get
that. Because I felt like there was more going on. Or I felt
stuff happened.
Yeah, it felt more like it was more culminating and things. I thought, you know, the what do they call the Mindhunter, the Martian Manhunter, Batman Mindhunter.
Yes.
Just trying to remember his name. You know, him trying to kind of like convince Hawkgirl to sort of switch sides or help him. Their fight, you know, looked pretty good in the art. I enjoyed, you know, Detective Chimp riding the invisible horse, like just the image of Nightwing being like dragged in thin air. It was kind of.
And now being like, what the hell? It can be invisible? He's like, well, yeah, some shitty detective you are.
Yeah, the whole idea this was Wonder Woman's gift, therefore. And it's not just that the horse itself is invisible, it's got an invisible aura, so if they all stand near it, they're in like an invisible bubble. That's a very important plot device in the issue. But Jean, you know, Martian Manhunter, when Mindhunter's basically saying, you didn't matter to Jean, he cared about his dead wife and kids, you're meaningless to him.
I love his transformation as well, Mindhunters, into the kind of the big vampire bat demon looking thing. Love it.
Yes. Very reminiscent of the hit film Blood Vessel.
I'll take your word for it.
It's a Shudder exclusive, and you can find it on my new solo streams review show, which comes out every Friday on youtube.com/MailFuzzTV. It's coming next week, guys. But seriously, there's like a vampire bat thing in it, and it's not exactly. It's more man bat-esque than this dude, but still.
Right, but this I couldn't tell you exactly where, but I have seen vampire demons kind of look like this in various media.
Is this the because after Hawkgirl smacks Mindhunter properly here with the old flaming mace or whatever that is this the first proper kiss between Jean and Kendra that we've had? Like full on, do we have the moment kind of thing?
No, I think there must have been something in the Justice League run where they were quite clearly a couple for a while.
I don't know if it was as you know, visible as this, but I mean, you may be right. Maybe I've just forgotten about it.
But I can't remember a specific example, but because it was after a point, they were obviously such a couple. It wasn't like they were being coy about it with each other.
I remember them talking about it. I just don't remember like a romantic kiss like this. But
no, that's fair. Maybe this is the first.
Because I feel like a big deal to me, even if it isn't the first. That, you know, the idea that this is like after, you know, Mindhunter's been trying to convince her that she doesn't mean anything to him. So it's this kind of a big moment where he kind of makes it clear that he does.
Yeah.
So yeah. So the rest of the team kind of, like I say, like Starfire and Cyborg and Lex all survived. It's just okay. I guess they did.
They're just here, I guess. Right.
Yeah. It's all a bit underwhelming. However, so they formed this plan. And their plan is essentially, because there's a little bit of doubt from Nightwing. He's like, you know, maybe we should sort of just like find the chair and the throne and call in the Justice League, because I don't know if we can do it. And they have to give him a bit of a pep talk. But
I like Lex calling them out, going, "Hey, I thought I was working with the Justice League. If I'd known the Teen Titans would be here, given that it is, Nightwing, Cyborg, and Starfire at this point. Feels like a pretty fair dig from Lex."
So they split into two teams. Half of them go after the Omega Knight to distract him. The other half go and try and free the Legion of Doom. The idea being from Lex that if they can free the Legion of Doom, then the Legion of Doom can actually help fight. They can, be on their side and help fight the Omega Knight. Which, obviously, very risky for obvious reasons, given who they are, but still not a terrible plan, all things considered.
Yeah, I mean, it's at the point where, sure, they're villains, but they have clearly been imprisoned here against their will, so there's a good chance they'll want to fight.
Yeah. In the end, it's basically Detective Chimp's the one who sort of, because they're like, how do we deal with this throne, which is basically the big tuning fork style thing with all the Legion of Doom strapped to it. And his plan is basically to just sort of say, "Hey, Omega Knight, you dick, come at me, bro." And Omega Knight hits the thing with his own blast of energy, which destroys it and frees all the team. So the cliffhanger page is Cheetah, Sinestro, and Grodd all being like, well, now we're coming after you, Nightwing, because we're evil.
Yeah, and it definitely plays like Chimp sacrificed himself for this. I'm not so sure he has.
Well, given the end of the last issue, most of them died. I'm not willing to believe that he's actually sacrificed himself.
Yeah, they did that. You know, he's caught in the blast, and it's just the hat that's left. But
yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, I'm not convinced. Even if he has technically killed himself in this, when we get to the end of Metal and everything,
it's not sticking out. Like none of this world is sticking, and that's okay.
But no, it makes for a big moment. Stuff like, as you say, actually happened. It felt like the Jean and Kendra segment actually had some impact and emotion to it. When, for the most part, up until this point in the arc, it's just been Kendra going, "Oh, we have to get to Jean. I care about Jean. Let's get to him." And then likewise, like getting to the chair, there's been such a sort of like just all these extra obstacles to get to the throne that actually having them say, "No, we're going to do this," and then actually having a result from it, and a cliffhanger that actually feels like it doesn't feel like a bullshit cliffhanger. It feels like, yeah, there is going to be this like sort of, can we trust the Legion of Doom?
Yeah, it's not like the best cliffhanger ever. It's it's fine. But I think the most important part is it's new. It's a new element. It doesn't feel like it's just, oh, here's danger because you were in danger all issue. It's something new, and it's a direct result of the actions that actually happened.
It's a result of progress.
Yeah,
that's important. I think it's a fine cliffhanger though, because it doesn't. I mean, it's not the most unique cliffhanger, but it doesn't.
No, I agree. It's fine.
It doesn't feel like bullshit though. It doesn't feel like I'm going to get to the next issue and go, well, they backed out of that. Like, I mean, sure, all it's probably going to be is Lex jumping in and saying, no, we have to work together, and that's fine. But the cliffhanger feels in character for who's on page, so it's fine.
Yeah, it absolutely is a fine cliffhanger. It's a fine, by the numbers standard comic cliffhanger.
Yes. So there you go. That's Justice League. And the arts, as it's been all arc, is generally solid. Really in the big splash pages kind of comes to life. The Omega Knight firing its beam at the tuning fork looks really good.
Yeah, I do think Rocha's art it's a little bit messy at points. It just sometimes feels like there's a bit too much going on.
Which is maybe why
there's too much in the scene, or if it's just too busy in the line work. Though.
Which is maybe why the splash pages come off the best. Because I will say the sense of scale's pretty good. When the knight's fallen, towards the end, and Nightwing standing in front of the body. There's a good sense of scale there at the very least. So,
yeah, I agree.
But what are you giving it?
I'm gonna give it a solid 7.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. 7 out of 10. Nice and simple. So cool. All right. Dark Knight's Death Metal Infinite Hour Exxxtreme. And I'm saying it like that because it's got 3 X's. I don't know how to get across the 3 X's without going Exxxtreme.
I mean, this is a Lobo issue, so I think the title is fair to have that many X's.
Yeah, no. When I got to the second one and realized it's actually just a continuation of the same through line, I was like, oh. And Conrad kept saying, we could just add those backups to this one. I'm like, not really. This one.
I didn't say this one in particular, although I might have done last week. I don't know.
You did, yeah. Last week you suggested that it could have been on this, but
okay, fair enough. I didn't know this was a Lobo one at that point. I guess.
Yes. I mean, Lobo was on the cover, so you knew at least one of the stories was going to be Lobo. But yeah,
right. But I think I'd seen multiple teams attached to it and just assumed, all right, it's 80 pages or whatever it is, and some of it's Lobo.
Well, it's more like 40, but and I'm glad because it would have felt like a long.
It would have done. All right. Yeah, it's whatever. The point was clear.
It's basically the story of what Lex got Lobo to do. Right. We've seen some glimpses of it, but we also get the idea of the Batman man.
The Batman who frags.
Batman who frags is the other title he goes by. It's Batman Lobo, who attacks Lobo. Lobo gets into a fight with him. Lex pulls him out last minute, and gives him the mission to find the death metal, which is this super powerful substance. Which in the second part, and I say second part rather than second story because it is really one through line going through the whole thing.
It is, and to be fair, it does label it as part.
Yeah, it does. Because the first part is by Frank Thierry with art by Tyler Kirkham. And the art in this first part is quite good because Kirkham's a pretty solid artist.
Yeah.
Really good stuff. Second part is Becky Cloonan writing with Rags Morales on the art, and this is Black Monday, the Solemn Grundy Batman versus Lobo. As Lobo's on Black Hawk Island, he's trying to get to the death metal. Hawkman's there. Hawkman, did you think it was a little bit weird how Hawkman just kind of shrugs and goes, "Yeah, well, I can't guard it forever, so I suppose I'll take you to it," kind of thing.
A little bit, yeah. I also thought in this story it was a little bit weird how what is clearly, like you say, Solomon Grundy Batman talks like Bizarro.
That's a bit odd, yeah. It was the same thing with Lobo Batman, to be honest. When he briefly mentioned his backstory that he's Batman who injected himself with Zarnian DNA, all I could think was, yeah, but why are you talking like Lobo? Like, that doesn't mean you should be talking like him.
Yeah, I know.
It doesn't really make a whole... I mean, it's fine. I know they wanted to have the fun with it and just do the wacky things, but it's a bit
I think that
strange.
I could let slide more because, like you say, it was just, look, just do with it. We're doing the Lobo thing. It's fun. And it is fun.
That said, though, the best part of the issue, by far, is when Lobo gets this dark metal, and it turns out he can basically form kind of like worlds and like universes with it. And we essentially get like 1 page, like the classic backstories of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, but with Lobo's own writing. And this is pretty funny. And it is actually relevant because at first it feels like a really... Because I almost thought for a second that the actual story was done and we were just getting some funny little backups at the end. But then it actually turned out, no, he's actually doing this with the death metal, right? So he's actually doing this.
Yeah.
And that's kind of funny. So... This was pretty... Just the dialogue. There was one in the Batman one that really... Because the first one's Superman, and we always say how, we don't have to ever see Clark land in the field again. We don't have to see Batman's parents get shot in the alley again. But there's a couple of moments here where, like, the gangster, the Joe Chill, is Lobo, and he's like, "Oh, look, it's a crime in Crime Alley. Who'd have thunk it?" Even though, don't get me wrong, we have to point out that it wasn't called Crime Alley until after this. That one of the reasons why it's called Crime Alley is because of what happened. But that's...
Yes, but it's fine because it's Lobo's interpretation.
That said, though, the panel before this, where... So Martha Wade says, "I do, forsooth, my beloved Zorro sucks." Thomas Wade says, "Prithee, my dear sweetheart," and all that other rich weenie barf. And then Bruce just says, "Fart." And I don't know why Bruce just saying fart made me laugh as much as it did, but it did.
All of this did good for me because then when the Joe Chill shows surprise Clyde's, and then you come out, whom's calling whom's Clyde?
Yeah, he's basically doing his impression of what rich people talk like. Is essentially the joke. And then the joke with the Superman one is basically that Martha and Jonathan are kind of idiots for going off to investigate a rocket.
Yeah, and then it's Baby Lobo inside. Which one of you bastiches is going to change my diaper?
And then the Wonder Woman is basically just talking about, that fragging stud Lobo, I'm going to make sweet bunny love to him all night, kind of thing.
And Lobo likes dolphins because they're the only things worth saving in this miserable universe.
Yeah, because Diana doesn't save Steve Trevor, she cuts off his head, and then we get a glimpse of Lobo Cyborg, Lobo Green Lantern, and Lobo Martian Manhunter. Martian Main Manhunter, who all just say, "Yes, dolphins. They're the best, Death to all but dolphins."
Yeah. I think it's the Wonder Woman one. Hang on, you precious dolphins. I'll save you from all these insufferable lamers.
I mean, honestly, those 3 pages with the highlight. I actually think what comes after it might be the worst section of the book. I found the conversation with Brainiac who shows up, and this is the one thing that kind of ties into Justice League issue that we just read. I will say, they've done a really good job of making all these tie-ins to death metal all kind of feel like they're following a timeline as we're reading them.
Yeah, the editorial department step in terms of, even if just in terms of getting the release schedule correct, and this being the following week from that Justice League issue.
It's good, yeah.
It's really good, yeah.
So, but basically Brainiac's explaining that Lobo needs to sort of help save the universe or give up the death metal. The Lobo Batman shows up, they have a bit of a fight. He wins the fight and sends him into one of the universes he's created. In fact, because he agrees to go with Brainiac. There's a whole joke here where Brainiac's like dressed like he's a 4th grade school teacher. But I mean, honestly, I found the dialogue here and the fight to be kind of just the most, I don't know. not tough to read, but just the least flowing part of the issue. It was just kind of whatever.
Do you know what I think it was? It was like we got 3 pages of the Lobo speech in those worlds that felt so smart.
Yeah.
And then it came back to the real world and the dialogue didn't change. Except now it's not doing the parodies, and it just kind of went, oh, okay, we're just doing this now.
Yeah, because I enjoyed the first 2 parts more than this last part after the parody pages, I would say.
Yeah, me too.
But of course, the epilogue is that we see where the Batman Who Frags went, and it's basically the universe where everyone's a Lobo. It's Lobo Superman, Lobo Wonder Woman, Lobo Flash.
Yeah,
all beating him up. So
Lobo Land.
Yeah, the last part was Sam Humphries with Dennis Cowan on the art. So this is a weird one because I would typically like Lobo stories all that much, but there was some stuff to like in here. I don't know how essential ultimately really that is, other than just he goes to get a MacGuffin and gets the MacGuffin. It's more just the writers having fun with the premise. It's especially the parody. Those 3 parody pages are almost worth the reading the book just for those 3.
I get that. Yeah, those 3 are good. I think the first 2 parts were solid. Like the whole Batman Who Frags thing was kind of fun. That whole fight sequence, everything at the start was a lot of fun. Probably mainly thanks to Tyler Kirkham. Let's be honest. I think he did a great job.
That was more on the art, than the writing.
But then the second part was a little bit more mixed. I still enjoyed it. Again, I think great art still. That really suited the stuff we were doing in that. Like the way it was drawn for Black Hawk Island looked really good. I
kind of felt like we didn't really need the Grundy part, the first half of it. Like, we could have just cut that out and just went straight to he arrives at Black Hawk Island and runs into Hawkman. That'd have been fine.
Probably, but it needed the extra fight, right?
Like, it's okay if it was, 35 pages instead of 40. That'd be okay.
Yeah.
You don't even need to lower the price. Really?
No, it's pretty not that different. And then the third part, I think, as I say, you had those parody pages, which were excellent. But then it felt like a lot of Brainiac text after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wasn't. There wasn't any like good bouncing between them, so it wasn't that funny.
And I'm a fan of Dennis Cowan in a lot of books. I think we just did the question with Jeff Lemire, right? And wonderful art for that story. Not sure it really suits this book as well, like as the other 2 art styles that we had in here. I think this one stood out a little bit more. It's very gritty and scratchy art, which again in the right book I really like, but in this here I didn't think it quite meshed as well as the others.
Yeah, I think that's fair. What are you giving it?
I'm gonna give it a 6 because it's all right.
Yeah, we're probably gonna give it a 6 too. I think this is kind of this is maybe the one that feels like, okay, this is maybe more typical tie-in quality, but it's not bad tie-in quality though. It's just perfectly readable. You get something out of it, but it's not essential like some of the other ones have been. It's
the sort of thing where if we'd had 20 of this style of tie-ins, we'd be giving this like a 3 or a 4 just because we were sick of them. Yeah. Whereas, I mean, this is like you say, this is one of 1 or 2 like this where you're like, yeah, sure, whatever. You're allowed a couple with any event like this. You get a little bit of leeway.
Yeah, that's basically it. So there you go. Punchline issue 1, James Tynion IV and Sam Johns writing with Mirka Andolfo on the art. So this is, it is Tynion here who's co-writing this, so it is obviously tying into what he's doing in the Bat world and everything that's going on. And interestingly, we have a lot of focus on Harper Row and her brother Cullen, right? Cullen's the name? It's been a while since I've dealt with the character, to be honest.
Although, I do have an admission to make. I couldn't finish this.
You couldn't finish this?
I got about halfway through, give or take, and I got to about a 5-page section that were just like assaulting me with walls of text. And I did have a bit of a headache at the time when I was reading this earlier. And I was just like, I can't do this. Just can't get through this chunk of just massive narration boxes. I think it's like a podcast section.
Yeah, so it's the all the podcast episodes. Well, you've failed this podcast, quite frankly. I hate to quote.
I know, but I could not get past that because it was just, and that's where I was like, I don't think Tynion's writing the dialogue for this issue. I think he plotted it and whoever the other person was, whose name I've forgotten already, unfortunately.
Sam Johns. So this is we get a little bit of backstory about how Punchline first met Joker. There was this horsey situation when she was on like a school tour of the TV studio somewhere in the city. But ultimately, the idea that she became obsessed, and it's kind of framed around like the court dates coming up, and it wraps around kind of what we've seen in the main Bat book. You know, this video message of her talking about how she's innocent. That kind of happens, you know, a little bit into the book, where essentially the purpose of this is to show the influence that she is kind of having on the city, and why kind of she calls herself Punchline, and the idea being that she believes that Joker's been telling this big grand joke, right? And no one's really finding it funny yet, because, well, you don't find a joke funny halfway through. You find a joke funny when you get to the punchline. And that's kind of why she's called Punchline. But the facilitation that she's having for Joker is to basically give him more of a following. Like, she's actually kind of building a following. Like, when she goes into the police like transport van, like one of the guards has a tattoo to show that he's an ally, and he gives her a phone. It's the parallels and kind of like the allegory here that it's just dealing with this idea that she's using memes in podcasts and social media to build up a following for an extreme character, an extreme movement. It's very, you know, having just watched The Boys season 2, it's very Stormfront, and you know the parallels to like extreme right wing kind of like media and particularly on the internet and those type of more kind of like extreme examples of your.
It felt pretty current in that regard. I think this is the first comic I've seen refer to simps.
Sure, yeah.
I don't think I've seen that in another one yet.
And it tries to make it a bit more personal because it uses Harper's brother, who, while I couldn't remember his name because it's been such a long time, I still remember that great issue, one of the best issues of Snyder's Batman run, which is the issue that focused on these two characters. I still remember that issue, so it still kind of meant something that he's kind of slowly seduced into thinking like one of these people who are supporting the Joker, almost without realizing that, because you know he's very, at first he's very adamant that he's against the Joker, but he's kind of starting to come around to the idea that Punchline's innocent and she's not so bad, and she didn't actually kill anyone. And of course we actually see by the end like the way she sort of lured out the Joker to form like a connection with him was basically done via multiple like murders and gassings and like very heinous crimes. But he's essentially like online, someone starts talking to him that he's kind of interested in, and he sends him the podcast and he starts listening to it. And this is where you kind of dove out, is that we get essentially like 4 or 5 of like episodes of her podcast, and it's before she became like, you know, Punchline. It's just when she was just investigating and sort of looking into him and building up to the idea that she was going to seek him out. And it's essentially going through the history of some of the big moments. Like, she references Arkham Asylum, you know, the Grant Morrison comic. She references The Killing Joke. She references a bunch of things. Like, just instantly me think of the big tentpole moments in Joker's career. And I kind of like, she actually talks about Arkham Asylum, and she refers to the plot of that book and says it's the first time you took hostages in Arkham, of which you've done many times. But then she kind of doubts herself, or was it the second or third? And I kind of like that flexibility. It's like, yeah, you know, it's an early Joker.
What do you count as continuity, kind
of thing? Yeah. So, you know, it's just playing with that. Brings up the laughing fish and all this history. So I will agree that there's a lot of text in that section. I kind of like the gist of what it was doing, though, in the sense that this issue's trying to take the history of the Joker and turn it into some kind of movement that feels like it's a parallel for like a real life kind of like extremism kind of thing. I don't know if the execution is necessarily all there, but I do think having Cullen, having Harper's brother be sort of asked to meet up in public at the end, and it turns out he's been invited to like essentially the crowd that's all wearing Joker masks, like cheering for Punchline as she walks into the courtroom. And having Harper sort of witness this, because she's sort of spying from above to keep an eye on Leslie Tompkins, who's testifying, basically as a doctor, or as to whether Punchline is, you know, mentally able to stand trial and that kind of thing. Like, I do think there's implications here for the future. The idea that she's building Joker into a movement where regular people are being seduced into the idea of Joker extremism. Again, like I don't want to call it right wing extremism because it's not. It's Joker extremism. It's using a fictional thing.
It is, but there are very real world example like in the UK. Tommy Robinson springs to mind as kind of being a key example of this particular thing. In like, oh well, victimized by the press. There's the court cases, and the army of supporters showing up at that. It feels like it's drawn straight from that in kind of what you're describing here.
Yeah, it's going down that path, and I think I actually like what the story does, and I like kind of what it's and especially since I think ultimately Punchline, again, this is something we've been saying in Batman, is that I think she's actually believes in something that isn't true, and I think that's kind of what makes the character a little bit interesting. She's this devout like soldier for the Joker, and she believes that ultimately Joker has an endgame. And I don't know if he does. I don't believe the Joker has a real endgame that he's ever going to hit. He keeps having new ideas and he keeps trying to accomplish those new ideas, but I don't believe there's some big endgame that he's ultimately trying to get to.
And I guess this is where you could replace, in this analogy of building up the movement, you could replace the Joker with any number of key political figures from the past few years. In that, they spout this rhetoric and this is what we're going to do, and ultimately, I don't. Looking from the outside as someone who's not one of their followers, I'm like, I don't think they have a plan. I think it's just obtain power. Like it's ineptitude almost. And I'm not saying Joker's plan is to obtain power. That's kind of he has his own agenda, shall we say? But it's not what Punchline thinks, and in the same way that I think it's not what a lot of the political followers think of these.
It actually makes Punchline a lot more interesting as a character, kind of the allegories that she's kind of leading to. And because there was that worry the first time you saw her, it's Harley Quinn 2.0, right? That was like the first time you saw her, that was the general kind of like, that's what she probably is. And I think even we felt it a little bit. Oh, okay, so here's Joker's new love interest, characters, whatever. But the more we're seeing what Tynion's doing, because unlike Joker, it does feel like Tynion has always had a vision in mind for what this character's supposed to accomplish and represent. And I think we're getting that gradually. And so for the most part, I think I actually quite like this issue, despite the fact that it's a bit too long and it's a bit wordy in places. But I think ultimately what it's achieving and what it's doing to set up the future of Gotham and like this Joker following that she's building for him is kind of interesting. And there are some nice little techniques used throughout, like the idea of the montage of her, like all the things she did to try and make the Joker notice her so that they could form a bond or whatever. Like she's straight up gassing people on subway trains. She's doing all this stuff. This comes not that long after we've had Cullen argue that she's innocent. She never did anything. Like she's not guilty of all this shit. But then we actually get this montage of her being this like just evil person, and killing multiple people. And I don't think it's an accident that when she's like killing people at this restaurant, the Joker kind of like grabs her from behind, and it's very reminiscent of the pose and that classic Joker Harley Quinn Alex Ross painting, where they're dancing. It's kind of like that, but like Punchline's like she's about to stab someone, and he sort of grabs her hand, but he's in like a tuxedo, and he's kind of holding her, and it's kind of the very similar pose. I don't think that's an accident. Definitely isn't. So
I'm sure it's not, especially with the way you've talked about how it's played with continuity, and referencing the history. Feels very self-aware in that regard.
Yeah, and she kisses him, and like the ending is this, they walk out of the court case, and you get the feeling that Cullen is being seduced by this person who believes these things, and it's notable that right before he puts on the mask, the other guy holds his hand, and Harper looks down and sees this. She sees her brother in the crowd, and it just says to be continued in 2021. So. Whether this is in the main Batman book or the second Bat title that we know Tynion's been teasing, we'll see. But I like everything this sets up, and I like the general beats that it's doing. Even if I agree the execution's not immaculate. I don't think it's that bad either, though. I don't think it was put down halfway through levels.
I mean, that's the thing. I was kind of enjoying what I read up to the point where I stopped, and then I got to that page, and I got about halfway through that first page of just wall of text, and I kind of, oh my god, this is too much. And then I flicked ahead, and I was like, oh my god, this keeps going for like 4 more pages. And then I looked ahead, and there was more of it later, and I was like, I can't read through all this. This is too much. even though I liked what I was reading before that, and I like everything you've kind of said about the ideas of it. I kind of appreciate what it's doing. I think the way it was written was too much for me.
I didn't think the writing was that bad to get through. It was a lot of it, and maybe it could have been trimmed down a bit, but it was supposed to be emulating this podcast where she's going into details, so it's kind of this, like, you know.
I think for me, it's when you have stuff like that, you have to make the rest of the page engaging. But at least the first 2 pages of this were just set across static, full page, more or less, backgrounds. There wasn't like a lot of interesting things going along with this. It was just, I don't know, 8, 10, 12 panels of just very dense narration. There weren't small panel boxes. It was just a lot of text and not a lot of visual imagery. And I think there are better ways to do this in a comic, frankly. I think that's kind of what it was for me.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea of Harper, like, having someone we know have someone close to them be radicalized, essentially. I think it adds a lot of, like, personal weight to it, which is quite nice. Also, her final podcast episode, because before she goes to the court case, like, she does like her final episode. It's episode number 52, because of course it is.
Yeah. No, I agree with what you're saying there about the idea of being radicalized there, and how interesting that is. Because I read a thread on Twitter the other day about people kind of who'd had family members or close friends or spouses who had kind of fallen to like queue and on holds, and them not knowing how to deal with it, and and how it's kind of ruined their lives because it's completely ruined their relationships with these people that they're very close to. And it was tragic to read some of this thread. And I feel like this is tapping into that energy, kind of by the sound. Go for the future. Going forward.
It's one of those things I'd have thought about halfway through this, or maybe not, maybe a bit later than halfway. But once it was sort of showing its cards a bit more towards the end of what it was doing, and I was kind of like thinking, like, can I buy that people in Gotham would even like follow the Joker like this? Like the idea that he would get a following where people believe in him after everything he's done for all the years that he's done it. And the sad part is that after about 10 seconds of thought, I went, yeah, sadly, I think I do. Like, it actually feels realistic that he would.
I mean, you only have to look to recent history of, I don't know, a week ago.
I know. It was one of those things where I stopped and thought about it and went, you know what, I'd like to believe that no one would be this dumb, but then, would you believe it? I believe it, so... there you go.
Yeah.
So that's the issue. Andolfo's art is pretty solid.
Yeah, I'm surprised you like her art as much as you do. It's very anime-esque, I think, her art. A lot of pointed faces, round eyes.
It's a little anime, but it's not like it's not absurdly anime. It still feels like a comic book. I think part of it is that it still has a decent amount of detail and some scratchy roughness where it needs to. I think when it's super anime but also super clean,
that when it bothers you,
it gets a bit on my nerves. It's a bit too cute. It's a bit too we want to be, I don't know, Sailor Moon or something. I don't know.
This kind of does a lot of the anime stylings. I mean, I'm looking at the title page now where Batman's kind of coming through the studio window and taking out Joker, and you've got what I'm pretty sure is Punchline there, kind of looking very anime-esque, with the eyes and the face shape. It's all like, it's very stylized in that regard.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at that page now. I can see what you see. That's maybe the most anime-looking thing in the whole book, though, is that face.
I don't know. There was, I mean, I felt like there was quite a lot of that influence there. Maybe it's just because I'm more attuned to Andolfo's art. I've seen a lot of it, and I kind of just know what to expect, and kind of I see it more. But yeah, I'm surprised it didn't bother you more. But I mean, I'm glad it didn't, because it's nice art.
Yeah, no, I'm not too bothered by that. There's definitely more anime. Admittedly, Cullen's haircut's a bit anime, but
I think his haircut has always been pretty anime, to be fair.
But that's I'm not here to judge the hairstylings of characters typically.
Yes, we are not the ones to talk about that.
No. But there you go. Also, the guy that's luring in Cullen, he's got a very Archie Andrews kind of look to him. It just occurred to me.
I assume this is the Bluff person.
Yeah, Bluff, the guy.
Right? Yeah.
That's his screen name because he starts talking to him online. Yeah.
Yes, that's kind of where kind of just before I stopped. So I didn't realize that's quite where it was going. But no, interesting stuff, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see how this stuff plays into the Bat side of things. And you know what, like the Bat corner of the universe, more often than not, tends to be pretty solid as a place to like explore. And it's not because there's anything inherently like easier or better about those characters. It's just because they tend to get a lot of good creative people in that corner because it sells well.
I think part of it is as well, because you can slap Batman on it and it'll sell well enough. It means you can have more Bat books, which means in theory you can diversify what they're doing a bit more. It gives you a bit more creative freedom. I mean, just before, I think it was just before Rebirth, we had Gotham Academy and Gotham by Midnight. I think they were both at the same time. And one was like this, full anime high school thing, and one was like the horror supernatural police book. And both are going on at the same time, and both sold well enough just because you slap Gotham on them, and it gives you that freedom to do those books alongside the main ones. I don't know if there's any other area in comics, or DC Comics specifically, that has that freedom, where it just has almost no diminishing returns on the amount of sales, where they'll still make their money just by slapping the name on it.
Yeah, so no, I'd say overall, I think the issue's pretty good. I think it's an interesting direction, and I like what it's doing overall. Yeah, it's just maybe a bit on the long side, maybe a bit wordy in places, but I'm definitely. I definitely like Harper Row being a factor again, because that was kind of a side character. I've still never really forgiven Snyder for introducing such a great character and then just forgetting she exists almost immediately. But yeah. It is what it is. So what are you giving Oh yeah, you didn't finish it.
I don't think it's fair for me to give it a rating, although I will say, despite having not finished it because of the writing, I like the ideas, which says to me I like what Tynion's doing, and I will be excited going forward. I don't really like the scripting of this particular issue.
Yes, just watch the second book be scripted by this person. Via Tynion's notes.
That would make me rather sad, I have to admit.
I mean, I thought it was a fine enough read, so I wouldn't be that upset to begin with. And but hey, anyway, I'll probably. I think I'm happy to go with a 7.5. I'm not going to quite call it great, just because there are things that could be spruced up, but the ideas in there are good enough that I do think it's worth the time if you care about what Tynion's Bat plans are for the next year. So that is Punchline. Superman issue 27, Brian Michael Bendis writing with Ivan Reis on the art. So yeah, we're nearing the end of Bendis' Superman run. Superman was fighting the alien, Sinmar, whose name I only remember because it was said a lot in this issue. So I thank you for that, Bendis.
Oh, one of those issues, was it?
I thank you for that. No, but this was a good issue. I mean, obviously the art and action's been torturous, and yeah, you'll find out again this month because you're on action again.
Oh God, I am, aren't I?
Yeah, if I remember correctly.
But a lot more whiskey that week.
Yes, but we got Ivan Reis here, so obviously the art is very solid. A lot of big splash pages, a lot of action, and we have a B plot again with Lois and with Lana. And if you remember last time they went into the Phantom Zone at the end of the issue, we had Superman and Sinmar go in there. Superman basically, as a last ditch effort, sort of brought them into the Phantom Zone to sort of keep the fight from spilling anywhere else. And Zadu shows up, the Phantom King, the first Kryptonian ever put in the Phantom Zone. He tries to interfere a little bit, but obviously doesn't go so well. Especially later on in the issue when Superman opens like a portal back to the real world, and Zadu tries to escape. And Superman's like, no, not you. It actually really made me laugh. It was kind of like that meme where someone will say, oh, all these great characters should do this thing, and it'll be like a lineup of 9, but it'll just get to the one in the middle, it'll say, not you.
Like, thank you for all the great whatever. Yeah, not you in the middle. Yeah, another one.
Yeah, it was basically that sort of moment. He just sort of grabs it. No, not you, and throws him back. I actually like what it does though, in terms of like basically Superman, who tried to communicate last time. He keeps trying here. He's like, you know what? I hit Luthor, I hit Brainiac, I hit Mongol and Darkseid, but this doesn't feel right. Something about this doesn't feel quite right. I have to try and show that I don't want to fight this thing. Whoever he is, I have to try and show that I'm not. So he basically tries to sort of point to himself and say, I'm Superman. And he does make some contact because Sinmar's like, Sinmar. But then Sinmar just immediately starts fighting him again. He's like, no, I have to try and stop this. So he opens a portal back to the real world and is like, hey, like, show me where you're from. Like, who are you? Where are you from? Because Calyx has nothing. Like, no idea where this guy comes from, what planet he's from, anything. So he follows Sinmar, who basically leads him back to his planet. And there's an orange sun, which, you know, I'm not entirely sure what an orange sun's going to do to Superman's body, but he does say he feels a bit weird and a bit woozy. So we'll see what the ultimate effects are. But obviously he's not going to be at the same levels of powers.
I thought I read an article about this, because I didn't realize it was about Superman 27 or whatever it is. I kind of just read it. Oh, yeah, Superman has a new weakness. And from what I read on the article, it was saying it affects his brain as well as his body. So he's not just, you know, weak and powerless. His mental function diminishes as well.
There is a line about his intellectual power isn't there, but I kind of just took that from the line that was said that he's not like super smart anymore. Like, he's not got the super, because early on in the issue it makes a point of him saying, hey, if you start speaking your language, I can start to decode it and figure it out quite quickly. I took that to mean as well, he can't do shit like that anymore. Like,
that's fair enough then. Like, you know, it may have been could easily have just been a misleading headline.
They may be right. Maybe the next issue will, because, you know, it's basically right at the end where Sinmar's like, okay, now you're here, we're going to like try you and, you know, punish you for your existence. But there's no need to fight anymore because you're weak, kind of thing. So Superman's kind of been led into this. I mean, I don't know if it was a trap per se. I don't think this was Sinmar's plan, but the way things played out and the opportunity presented itself, he's just like, well, there's no point in fighting you now. And it's worth mentioning he's speaking properly now, because here he's got like a translation thing, so he can just speak and we understand him, and it's fine. But yeah, I mean, maybe he is dumb. Maybe he'll be kind of an idiot next issue, and that'll be kind of like what they do with the Orange Sun. So no, I mean, it's interesting to see how different suns affect him from time to time, like the different colors. The Lois and Lana story isn't much to it; it's just a couple of pages. But Lana comes over and is like, hey, I want to get your like opinion on like the interview I did with Clark before I publish anything. And Lois is like, oh geez, it's that bad? He said something, you know, that I might not like. But she insists that Lana read something before she publish anything, and it turns out Lois has actually written a new book, because she says, hey, you know, this is my book on the tablet, and she's like, oh, the one you just, you know, did? Like, yeah, I read it already. It's like, no, this is a new one. And there's a joke about her spelling, because the first thing Lana says is a typo, and Lois is like, yep, there will be. But that's basically all that side plot is. So we'll get to kind of what the reveal of that is next time as well, I assume. But a lot of this is the fight, a lot of this is Superman trying to reason. I think I enjoyed it kind of in that very Superman way, where he's trying to, no matter what, you know, do this peacefully. He's trying to stop this from being a fight the entire time. So there is that fundamental level that I think Bendis really gets with Superman, is this constant trying, like, no matter what, to do the peaceful outcome, to not just be to be a fist fight. And I appreciate that. You know, it's kind of it's what we always talk about in Star Trek Next Generation, about Picard trying to do the diplomatic thing at all times. You know, it's always just a last resort.
Picard is basically just a knockoff Superman.
It kind of is, yeah. We say that a lot. We were talking about Next Gen. Whenever he makes a speech about doing the right thing, it's like, yeah, this is this is why Star Trek has changed so much, because much like Superman, there's this belief that the general audience can't stomach at the proper Star Trek story. So now it has to all be action, whiz bang, explosions everywhere. It can't just be like Star Trek, the captain of the Enterprise doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. It has to be whiz bang.
I wonder then, if we look at the early seasons of Discovery and maybe Picard, and we go, oh, it's all been infected by the J.J. Abrams, need for action. Maybe we should be blaming Man of Steel for its shit.
J.J. Abrams Superman was first. Superman. J.J. Abrams Star Trek was first.
No, I know, but maybe instead we should be more directly blaming Man of Steel for introducing, if even Superman needs to change, then Star Trek has to, because I get why they did that for the big blockbuster movie reboot.
Okay, sure.
I get that. But instead of the shows kind of reverting back.
There's a lot of parallels. Although Superman, to be fair, I mean, it's not a one-to-one, because Superman, because, we go through a lot of different runs, we go through different arcs, there are obviously lots and lots of good Superman stories and comics still that still feel very Superman. It's more just the movies that are struggling to be Superman. But, that's what it is. But yeah, no, it's a fine issue. It was a fairly quick read. We're building up to wherever it's going. I will say, this is probably the most interested I've been in Sinmar as a character, because up until now he's just kind of been like, he's another alien with super strength and shit, he wants to fight Superman. These moments where it felt like he was actually starting to listen, and maybe Superman can convince him to, talk to him and find a peaceful resolution, is making him far more intriguing than he was before. Admittedly, he does sort of say at the end they're still going to try him, and I don't know if execute was a word used, but at the very least, punishment was. So we'll see how that plays out. But I do wonder if it's going to be this convincing them that he is not a threat, and yes, again, a peaceful solution, which would be a far more satisfying conclusion to this than anything else. So we'll see if that's actually the path it goes down. Solid 7 as far as the rating goes. It's good. It's not great. It's not one of his best issues, but it's not also not like issue 25 that was honestly one of the by far the worst issues of the whole Superman series. Action, annoyingly, was the better book for a long time, and then John Romita Jr. came infected. In, and then it sank. It hurts so much. Anyway, that's Superman 27. Wonder Woman 766, Mariko Tamaki writing, with Steve Pugh on the art. Here we have, the Vertigo stuff. Wonder Woman's blind, and we joked about her getting some sort of Daredevil-esque sense, and I feel like we should have predicted that the lasso would let her see the truth.
Yeah,
we should have predicted that.
We probably should have done. I'm gonna just level with you. This issue feels like a whole lot of nothing. Like, not a lot happens in this issue, and I kind of felt it kind of going in circles a little bit.
Okay.
And I don't know, maybe I'm missing something, and I'm hoping you can kind of fill me in as to why this is a better issue than I am assuming in my mind. But like when I read it, I'm like, okay, that was the end. That was it. It felt like a whole lot of nothing.
Well, it's actually billed as the first part of the new arc. It's called Max Lord's Revenge Part 1. And the ending's basically Max finally making his move. Like, there's a little bit of teasing early on when he's leading her blind that he can't be trusted, but he does eventually abandon her.
Yeah. And
Vertigo shows up, and Wonder Woman's left to deal with that on her own, and she blindfolds herself with the lasso to see through it. I will say it's a little bit weird how essentially at the end Max just kind of says, the effects of that thing will start to wear off. She'll probably get her sight back soon. It was kind of just a weird wishy-washy way of doing it. For the most part, though, it is Wonder Woman fighting blind with the various soldiers, and then destroying the Vertigo's tech that's letting him do all this extra stuff that he doesn't usually do. And that's kind of it. The big thing at the end of the issue, though, is Max actually making his move where he's getting, he's retrieved some tech that he wanted. We don't quite see what it is, I don't think. But he retrieves something, and this woman who was kind of held captive by Vertigo comes out and he's like, you're here to save us, kind of thing. And he says, I'm here. I'm not here to fight for you, really, but you will do my bidding. And he uses his powers for her to go send a message. And she jumps off the top of the castle, and Wonder Woman has to catch her. And she relays this message that Max has given to her to say, you knew this was coming, Diana. All paths led to this. The time has finally come for me to watch you die. And this is basically like, okay, so he's making his move, and we're at Max being a villain again, which is a bit quicker than I think than we were expecting this.
and maybe hoping for as well, because it felt like we were just kind of getting a bit of a groove going with the last like 2 issues of the like the side stories with Max as the sidekick.
It does feel a bit early to me. I will say I actually like how he delivers the message. I love the idea of him making someone throw themselves off the building and like having this innocent bystander essentially have to like regurgitate this to her. I think that it feels proper evil. It feels proper Max Lord, I guess. And I like some of the art in this issue. Wonder Woman's Daredevil vision. I thought looked kind of cool early on.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I mean, and typically because it is a lot of fighting, it is very reliant on the art, but the art is pretty solid. So
yeah, the art's fine. And I think, like I said, it's just this issue felt like a lot of just okay, we're gonna. Oh, can you see? Can you not? We're gonna walk over to the castle. Oh, there's some people with guns. You should probably take those out. And then the bit at the end with Max Lord, the last like 3 or 4 pages, whatever it is really quite good and interesting, and I like that. But I kind of felt like I was only just getting started in the issue because of, I guess it must have been about 15 pages of the walking and the fighting and stuff that, and I felt like in my head it would only been about, I don't know, 5 pages worth of story. So when I got to the end, I felt like I was only like halfway through an issue.
I think what's weird for me is that at the start of the issue when he's leading her by the lasso because she's blind, and
yes.
I thought, okay, this is an interesting mechanic because now she has to kind of put trust in him. And if anything, I was going to expect that this issue might be the one that kind of like he's the most trusting he's ever been. Like he's going to like pull through here and really be like useful to her because she's blind and she needs to trust him. And then the turn would come later. Now I suppose it does also kind of work that it starts off with that level of trust having to be there because she's this vulnerable, and then by the end he's made the turn. But it does feel a little bit on the early side for it. I do think the moment itself is actually executed very well. It just feels like it needed a bit more time. It's kind of this thing where we set up this Vertigo stuff, so we had to kind of deal with that, and that's kind of what a lot of the issue is.
Again, that's also something that felt really quite quick, right? Because Vertigo is not a nobody.
No.
And it was this whole big thing at the end of last issue, or back half of last issue maybe, where it's Vertigo behind this. Let's go and figure this out and stop this, and then he's amped up on Lord Tech and blinds her, and then he's beaten here. He's
just a stopgap. It's because we always knew Maxwell Lord was ultimately going to be the end game villain to what this was building to. It was always going to be the case, but
yes,
it does feel like it's gotten there a little bit quick. I mean, the book looks good, and there's a lot of moments that are handled very well. So I'm not that down on it, but
it's why I don't think it's a terrible issue. I don't hate it. Like I say, it looks fine. It looks, I mean, pretty better than fine. That's probably a little unfair. It looks good. The fighting is all perfectly decent. I got to the end and felt like my reaction was, oh, that's it. There's no more of the book. And not because I was, sometimes you have that feeling where, I'm really enjoying it. And I'm like, oh man, is that it? Where's the rest? But I felt unfulfilled at the end of this issue. Like I hadn't had enough progression, enough events happen. Not enough conversation that was meaningful happen. I'm not saying, it has to be action, big events, but there wasn't enough of any individual things that built up to make me feel like I got a full comic's worth of content, I guess. It felt a little bit stretched out.
Yeah, maybe that's just a structural problem where, okay, all these other things that are happening in the next 2 or 3 issues are all clearly mapped out, and this issue just needed to get us to this point and no more.
No, I agree. It's the sort of thing that doesn't leave me worried going forward. It's, they say, it's concerned, this issue's a bit stretched and pacing, and maybe this section of the run overall will feel a bit rushed now because of, okay, we're doing the Max Lord evil stuff now. I'm actually quite excited for that arc at the same time.
Yeah, this is one of those things where what you're talking about here is far more of a problem reading this month to month. I've got a funny feeling reading this in trade because we can just go on to the next issue. This wouldn't even register that much.
Probably wouldn't even register in my brain, no. I agree, but we are paying for these monthly, and that is part of the consideration, I think.
Oh no, it's worth talking about. I also look to the longevity where ultimately after this, no one's ever going to read this single issues again. In the same way where they can just binge, even if they're reading singles, if they've bought it that way, they're still going to be able to go to the next issue.
Barring people being weird and doing a whole show dedicated to reading back issues at a lower pace than they should have done.
We'll get to it. All right.
Yeah.
The next preview is coming.
It is. Yeah, no, barring people do that, yeah, they're never going to read it like this again. But as someone who who is reading it like this, who's paid for it in this format, I feel justified in that critique. But I agree that long term, it probably doesn't ruin the overall story that much.
It's the same with TV shows where sometimes the pacing, like week to week, might not be perfect. But there's some shows that actually translate from having slightly off pacing week to week that all of a sudden when you start binging them, and it's not like with a binge show where they expect you to do it so they don't structure it properly, but there are some shows where it feels like it's still structured episode by episode, but there's kind of a pacing thing where it feels like maybe not a full enough amount of progression each week, but once you binge them, it's like, oh wait, that's actually a really good binge show, and all of a sudden...
I agree, and it's the sort of thing with a lot of those shows, much like this particular comic maybe, where not every issue or episode feels like that. It's, one in every 5 or 6 maybe feels a bit weird and off, and it'll be fine in the long run. But just as you're watching it or reading it that particular week or month, it's a little bit disappointing.
I guess all I'm trying to say is that when it comes to these serialized things, comics and TV shows, there are some that actually translate to end up improving after the fact when they exist that way forever afterwards. So it's kind of this weird thing where you do have to acknowledge that if there's a detriment to the single issue format at the time of release, but I think you also have to equally acknowledge when, this might actually work better later on, which is... And I think, especially with comics, where I feel like there may actually be more people, like, I don't think it's going to be that long. Like, I think within 5 years, more people will have read this in trade form than
did
single issues. Yeah,
probably. And I agree with that. I think the reason this one feels a little bit more disappointing than some other examples that I can think of is there are some books that I can think of that as I'm reading it, I'm very aware this is written for the trade. They happen to be putting out in single issues to make the extra money, but really this is written for the trade. And I haven't been feeling that with this run until this issue, where I suddenly felt it all of a sudden. So it feels like a shock to the system.
We'll see. I mean, I'm glad they took a couple of issues to show them have a couple of adventures before they did this. I wish it was a bit more, but...
I wish we'd got a full, 4 or 5 issues of that, honestly.
But at least they did a couple. Because it would have felt weird if they just immediately went to,
Yeah, I agree.
this. So, what are you rating it?
I'm going to give it a 5.5, which sounds really negative, but it's it's fine, which is kind of where I fall for a 5. And it's a little bit above average because the art's quite nice. And the ending.
Yeah, I'm definitely more positive than you. I didn't have as many problems, even though I do have a couple of things that feel a bit off. So I'm going to go with a 6.5 for me. So, cool. The Flash 765, Kevin Shinick on writing with Sami Basri and Will Conrad on the art. This is part 3 of this really weird and wacky fill-in arc before we get to the Endless Winter issues.
This arc, this issue, I was kind of going, oh, it's okay. And then all of a sudden we have more very strange leaps in logic to conveniently get to the next stage of the plot.
Yeah, there's some odd stuff with this arc. Because the last issue, of course, ended with the connection to the Speed Force being severed and Barry without his powers, which is just an annoying cliffhanger in general because we've done it too many times. But he's looking into the crime and he's looking into the cell at... I was going to say Arkham there, Iron Heights. And kind of looking into all this stuff, and I think the big thing for me, bizarrely, is that he just kind of realizes he's going through the metal detector because it's something the guard says.
That's the one that bothered me.
Yeah.
Just before we get to that, in the saying he's going through the cell and there's things scratched into the floor, like Philosopher's Stone, and then other Latin words. Why does he need to take actual etchings of the Latin words instead of just jotting them down? That they're still. He's not looking at the way they were written or. The handwriting or they were carved by this. He just wants the word. It's just a notepad would have done his job perfectly fine here.
Yeah. So he just realizes that, oh wait, no, the ring. When he had my ring, he did something to my ring. There's nothing wrong with my powers. He takes the ring off, and whoop-de-doo, I'm the Flash again.
Yeah, I also really. This is the one that got me. Like I say, it's just this huge leap in logic. It was like the Magnus to Magus thing last time.
I don't mind it being the ring's been tampered with to sabotage him. It's just so weird that he figures it out in the end of the first scene. It's just all of a sudden he's back to his powers again. I don't know. Like your whole cliffhanger would imply that he's going to have to go at least an issue. But if the end of the issue something triggered the idea that it was his ring, or he took it off for some other reason, and then wait a minute,
I could even forgive it being the first scene that had him get his by the end of the first scene he's got his powers back. I could live with that because it's a comic book cliffhanger at the end of the day. But I need a reason for him to get to that conclusion, not just someone, he's going through a metal detector. Hey, have you got any metal on you? Oh, metal? Shit, my ring. That must be it. I'm like, wait, what? It just feels so contrived, and it was like we were saying last time.
It would have played better if he just said, okay, is there any metal? And he's like, oh yeah, my ring. And he took the ring off, and then when he took it off and put it down in the little tray, and then he felt something, that'd be fine.
I think it's particularly notable because he takes his keys out of his pockets and puts them in the jar to go on the tray, and he still has his ring on as he goes through the metal detector, which is fine. They're too small; they won't get picked up. I know this. You don't need to take the ring off. That's that is okay, but that's not what's reminding him. If it was like you say, if he'd had to take the ring off and then all of a sudden he's like, oh, I've got the, he can feel his connection come back. Maybe I don't know. Then okay, that makes more sense to me. This here just something else metal was mentioned, so his mind triggers that. Oh, that must be it.
Yeah, an ongoing thing that I've had a problem with in this little arc, and I've appreciated the attempt to have more Barry and Iris kind of like romance, because I do think it's missing sometimes in the ongoing stuff. But there's like another weird moment here where it feels like they've only just met in some cases. And the one here is that she's kind of flirting with him. She calls Alchemy a better chemist, and Barry gets a little bit, better chemist? We thought, like, he gets a bit, his ego's hurt. It's like, okay, I'm kidding, you're better looking too. And she talks about, well, we've got a lot of chemistry, and, you know what sort of reaction, what process comes next. And he's like, oh, I know exactly what comes next. And you turn the page, and he's like, I've got to recreate this substance that I found at the scene of the crime, kind of thing. And I don't have a problem with that joke, right? That joke, if he was intentionally doing it to be funny, and she sort of had like a look in her face that was like, oh, yeah, okay, you tease.
She looks genuinely distraught.
Yeah, she looks genuinely upset, like she's just been rejected. And he admits that he did it intentionally because he's trying to focus on work, but it comes off really cold and really like just awkward.
I think what's really bizarre about it is the next like 3 panels are just him looking really intently at like beakers full of chemicals and doing his job. Like there's nothing. Like
I say, if he said it with a smirk in his face, like oh, I know exactly what comes next. I've got to do this, but it was intentionally trying to be funny and sort of teaser,
which does feel like something Barry would do.
Yeah, but she looks like, because even her line of dialogue, that's not what I was thinking, and it sounds so cold and like I'm like, what is this?
She looks so sad in that art of her walking away there.
It's funny for the previous page talked a lot about them having chemistry, and I felt none of it in this page.
Yeah,
it was just all gone, and like this just tonally feels like something's wrong. Like I don't know. Maybe that's just right down to the writer here not really having a beat for how they're supposed to talk, or even have an understanding of where they're supposed to be in the relationship at this point.
I feel like, and as far as I'm aware, this writer is relatively new to comics. We've never encountered him before. This is something that, okay, I can forgive people not having voices right, or even structure, not having right when they first, enter the craft. That's something they'll pick up over time. But this is something the editors should have come back to him and been like, look, they're in a bit of a better place than this. We should rewrite this scene and be more appropriate for where they are in their relationship. That's what editorial's job's supposed to be. And I know we praised them earlier with their handling of the metal event and the timings and everything there. And this here, I feel like, was there anyone at editorial looking over this?
It's a fill-in arc, so maybe no one's paying attention. No one cares.
It's very possible.
They're just not looking. Flash goes to fight Alchemy. Alchemy reveals that he knows Barry's name, so Barry speeds off to Iris, because if he knows who Barry is, then he knows who Iris is. So she has to be protected. Takes him to the family cabin, and then it gets kind of weird. It turns out that all the previous like alchemies who've all had the stone essentially all kind of reside like in him, and all this evil stuff that alchemy's doing isn't really the alchemy that the Barry knows. It's kind of like the evilness of all these previous like Philosopher's Stone holders kind of influencing them and coming through, and their personality taking over. So the alchemy as he knows him isn't actually. I mean, he's a bad guy, but he's not as downright vicious as all these old guys.
I think another thing I do need to critique here is at this point of the issue is I felt the art shift.
Sure.
Because it shifts as soon as he's grabbing Iris and running her out the city, and then the next page is at the house in Nebraska where he takes her to.
Oh, actually,
and it's such a clear shift.
Something on the writing, I appreciate. I actually liked well enough the point that it makes earlier on, where Iris points out there's a mistake in the grammar because it's Philosopher's Stone with the apostrophe after the S instead of before the S. I felt like the writing was very clunky and that it kind of repeated a couple of times.
Same point. Yeah.
Where when Barry said it later, it just sounded really clunky. It's like, wait, S apostrophe means it's plural, but apostrophe S means it's one Philosopher's Stone. And I'm like, sure, there's a more succinct way of like getting that point across.
I agree. I think the problem is it's as he's running her out and he goes, oh, then something dawns on me. Something Iris pointed out earlier, which is only now starting to register. And then it goes into the whole, like...
Yeah, because...
pretty much word for word what she said earlier.
Because she said it earlier, all Barry had to say in his narration is, oh, I just realized something Iris said earlier. The way Philosophers is written means that it's multiple philosophers, and that'd be it. Like, he could just sort of like sum it up by saying what it means, rather than actually explaining the logic of the grammar. Just clunky.
Just referring back to what we'd already read is fine, especially when it's in the same issue and not that long before.
It was like 4 pages, something like that. It wasn't
exactly
at all.
Yeah.
It turns out Trickster was also the Trickster apparently implanted little cameras in Barry's pupils.
And that's how they know what he's doing. They're watching everything. That's why they know they're at this cabin. I don't know quite how they got to the cabin that fast, but whatever.
I don't know. Philosopher's Stone and stuff. Alchemy stands up and there's fire around him. He's like, I'm all powerful. To be continued.
The usual.
Yeah. This is this thing where I'll finish this now because I don't want a gap and there's only one left.
I was going to say, there is only one left, right?
But I almost didn't read this one. I was kind of like, I'm squeezing stuff. I want to do a Patreon book, and I'm like, I could just skip that. I was like, there's only 2 left. I may as well.
I'll be honest. I nearly didn't read this as well. I was like, I suppose there's only 2 left, and it is a light week.
Yeah.
If this had been on a busier week, I probably wouldn't have bothered.
But now there's only 1 left, so we might as well finish and see how it.
See if we've got any more structural complaints or weird leaps of logic.
Yeah, what are you rating it?
It's a 4.5.
Yeah, I mean, it's readable. I'll go with a straight 5. I'll just put it down the middle. But much worse can be had, as much as I have complained about enough stuff. Okay, so Hawkman, issue 29. Robert Venditti writing, Fernando Passarin on the art. Take it away.
Yes, it's nice to finally get to be positive this week, because I feel like I've been very middling on like all the books.
Well, you are negative, Nancy.
Hey, I'm not going to be on this issue. This issue is fantastic. And it sucks that it's the last issue. This is the final issue of Venditti's Hawkman. It's over, ready to be collected in a glorious omnibus in about 3 or 4 years' time, which you should all pick up if you haven't been reading this. So it does pick up right where we left off on the last issue, where they're fighting Hathset. Carter stabbed himself with Hathset's magic curse dagger. That was the big cliffhanger, that he's dying from the dagger, and then all of a sudden he's not dying. Chera jumps in and starts fighting him. Hathset, and all the zombies. She's angry that he's dying, and then it gets to a while, and Hathset just doesn't understand why he's not dying. Like this, this dagger is cursed by whatever Anubis has cursed it. I don't know, and it should be killing him. It's deep enough of a wound, yet somehow he's not. And he pulls it out. He summons his mace towards him, and he does something. The mace lights up. It glows, and he actually brings the two, the mace and the dagger together, and they kind of have a reaction, and they explode. And they're on this train, and the whole train just is in pieces. There's 12 or 15 different cars all just scattered all over, and it's right before it got on this big bridge. One of the train cars did kind of in the explosion kind of jump forward and take out a chunk of the bridge in the middle. Visually very impressive. And it's when we cut away and we see it's actually like melted the dagger. The dagger is just the hilt and a tiny little bit left. It's basically destroyed. And that's it. And none of them quite understand what's going on, but it's like, no, they've accepted that they can die now, and that's okay. But they, as Shira puts out at one point, she doesn't want to live without Carter. And that's why they're still fighting for each other still, even though they've accepted that they will die and they won't reincarnate anymore. And as they're doing this, stuff happens. He goes on the bridge and it all collapses with the more train cars, and he falls into nothingness. And like, don't worry about it. He's dead. He'll be back in another body in another life, but we'll worry about it then. And that's kind of the end of the main story. Is they patch up and they fly on home, and it's a big double page splash of them flying off. And this is kind of where it leads into the epilogue, which is one of the highlights of this entire run. Is this 5 or 6 page epilogue that we've got here. And it brings back the journal entries, that same narration text boxes that we've been having since the start of the run. So it's just really neatly bookends it. And it's like, oh, that was the last we saw of Hasta, but not Hatset's spirit. He returned in various incarnations. Sometimes we fought him, sometimes we killed him, sometimes he got away. But they were never they were never as big a fight as that. And like, after that train ride, we moved on. We fought. We joined old enemies. We joined old friends to fight old enemies, and you see them like fighting with the JSA. And then we met new friends and fought new enemies, and they're fighting with the Green Lantern Corps and one of the Guardians. And then they're like, we had adventures in other realities that I couldn't explain at all, and it's very. I don't know. The way I want to describe it is Mike Allred-esque as a panel. If that means anything to you.
Yeah, I know how that looks like.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I want to describe it. And it's just one panel, and then we cut to old man Carter, like old man, like long grey hair, beard, and he's wearing like these hawk robes. He's I'm old now by anyone's measure, and you never forgive yourself for what you've done, not even after God says you've atoned, but you can still be better. I've been blessed with all these lives. But then, Shira comes in. She's still here. The two of them are still kicking around. She's in like full battle gear regalia with a big staff. It's like, oh, isn't it your turn to cook dinner? And they're like, oh, she actually teaches the young generations now. That's what she does. They're not fighting. And, they're like, oh, yeah, all these things that we've seen together, it's great that we're still together. And after all the time and space, every millennium and world, these are the legacies that matter. And it cuts to the final page, and it's Earth in the 40th century, and they're still there teaching the young generation. So that was their loophole, is how no, they don't reincarnate anymore, but they are essentially immortal in this one last life together. They are still aging very, very slowly, it seems, because they look like they're in like their 80s or 90s here, like they're old. But they're still kicking, still getting stuff done, writing the journals, training the youth, and they've lived through everything, all the history of Earth to this point now, it seems, which is a wonderful new status quo to leave Hawkman in, that we're not doing reincarnations anymore, at least until a writer decides to change that, of course, which I would expect this to last forever because that's the nature of comics, right? But we are doing immortality, and that's kind of why the knife at the start of the issue, the cursed blade, didn't kill him, because they are seemingly immortal now. And this is a great status quo to go forward, and anyone can revisit this, and leaving this with Carter as the historian and the journals means we've got a really neat framing device for any miniseries they want to tell, set at any point in history between this book in the 1940s or wherever we are to the 40th century. We can kind of just pick a journal and Carter told this story, read through the journal with the narration boxes and go through it. It's such an easy place to pick up and run with, and that leaves me excited for the future of Hawkman, and maybe we will get some minis down the line, even if we don't get another ongoing for a while. I feel like a mini might sell okay. But this is a really great issue. It completely bookends the run. It does exactly what a final issue should. Leaves it in a nice, exciting new status quo. In the sense that we can just pick up and do them in the JSA. We can have them in the modern day with the Justice League, or we can pick any period in history / future from then onwards and just tell a journal story. Or we can do one of the previous lives as a journal story still as well, if we want to just play with. If we still want to do Thanagarian Hawkman stories, or if they want to do, I don't know, the Kryptonian Hawkman stories, for example. Like, they've got all this free reign. It does feel like it's truly unified Hawkman in a way that going forward we can just play with whatever we want in a really exciting way and not worry about it. For the first time, we won't need to pick up a Hawkman book and go, okay, what origin are they doing? How are they playing with it? It's sorted. It's solidified. This is it. Play with whatever you want. And you don't need to explain it anymore. Which has me very excited. It's a great issue overall. Passarin doesn't have as much to show off as he has done in previous issues, but the fight scene at the start's really solid. The little pages, with like the JSA, for example, really nice to see. It's like a 9, this issue. It's great. Wonderful run. Probably the best Hawkman run in existence.
Okay. Is there a lot of competition for
that? People are quite fond of the Jeff Johns run.
I suppose. Is there another one?
I mean, there's probably some older ones that I'm not as familiar with that people probably like if they like the older stuff.
Maybe. I don't know. I've never really heard anyone talk about much in the way of Hawkman runs before.
Nor have
I. Alright, cool. So that'll take me on to American Vampire issue 13, and to explain why, every month on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, patrons at the $30 tier, which is the tier where you can make myself or Connor, depending on which one you pick, or you can get a combo, the both I suppose, but you can make myself or Connor read a book once per month, and I am doing American Vampire issue 13 today for that reason. So this is the start of the next arc, because the third trade's kind of weird. It starts off with that sort of one-shot issue that I did last time, but this is the start of the next proper arc, which is back to Henry and Pearl, and then being at the focus, which is good, and does feel like we're kind of building to kind of the bitter end. It's called Ghost War, and it starts off. It does that traditional thing of like something from a little bit later in the timeline, where, well, actually that's that trailer. It starts off with like almost like a recap kind of page, where Hobbs, the head of the Vassals of the Morning Star, is explaining kind of the situation. There's vampires, but an American vampire was created, and then he started another one. And our mission is to always kill vampires, blah blah. But it does that thing where it's set in 1943 on a small island off the coast of Japan, and we have Henry writing a letter to Pearl, basically saying goodbye and explaining how bad things have gone. He's sure he's going to die, and mentions Skinner Sweet is even involved in some way. And you're thinking, okay, is he in the war? Like, what's going on here exactly? But it flashes back to a month previously, and we find out that they were living in Hawaii, and when the war started, they wanted to get involved, even though they were trying to stay off grid. And he was given a position, sort of helping, the base, and that he was considered a little bit too old to actually go and, fight in the traditional sense. And we have this sweet moment between them where Pearl's trying to, seduce him in the morning, but he kind of just makes an excuse, saying that he's too busy. And the letter sort of narration kind of comes in and sort of talks about how he regrets that morning and how he should have stayed. But we get this sense throughout the issue that Henry's kind of living with some pent-up rage, that he's kind of got this anger in him, perhaps because he's growing old and Pearl isn't, and he's feeling more and more separate from her. And he gets into fight with some of the younger soldiers who beat him up and joke about him breaking a hip and stuff like that. And he's essentially, it's like he's on a bit of a warpath looking for punishment. And that's when Hobbs shows up and essentially offers him a place on a squad that he's sending, because this island, which is now seen as like a really valuable base for the American troops, actually has a vampire nest on it. So their mission, impersonating part of the actual military, but it's obviously a Morning Stars squad, is to go in and essentially kill all the vampires so that the military can do what they're supposed to be doing without any threat of vampire. And I actually really like this from a mythology standpoint. This idea that they're, unbeknownst to the actual sort of system, they're going in and trying to make everything run smoothly by making sure vampires that they know about don't interfere with the natural order of things. That's a really fun idea to that, a fun element to that. But he's like, hey, you've been looking for a fight. We made this deal because you told us the weakness of the American vampire, and we made a deal to keep you and Pearl off the grid, off the books. Unfortunately, you're making that difficult by enlisting in the military. It tends to put you on the map a little bit. But you've been looking for this fight. You might as well direct it somewhere useful, and it gives them this purpose. And and maybe that's part of what Henry's been missing, is the idea of a purpose. But Pearl, when he tells her about this, basically reveals that when they first enlisted, and she wasn't sure if he was going to be sent off away, and it was just kind of lucky that they got to sort of stay back and sort of be in Hawaii. But she reveals that she actually drained some of her blood and put it in a vial, and the idea being that if he's in a situation, in a war type situation, that he could drink this and become a vampire at any point. Like, he's got that choice. And she gives it to him. And he does notably look older. They are, Albuquerque's going out of his way to make sure he looks a bit older now. Because it has been, about 20 years since they met. Well, actually, it's not quite as long as that. But it's, it was in the 20s when they met, probably the late 20s. Now it's the early 40s, so it's maybe about 15. And she's not aged a day. He is aging. And notably, because now he's in his late 40s or whatever he might be at. And I think one of the things that I love about the art in this issue specifically is that it has a different tone, because after this beautiful late night on the beach kiss after she's given him this vial and she's crying from her eyes because he's going off to do this, and you've got this big splash panel of them with the moonlight behind them, you turn the page and it's this misty docks at Pearl Harbor, the big ship. All the colors are very muted, browns and grays and greens. And it really feels atmospheric. It's kind of like the start of a horror movie when they go on the ship to some place dangerous. It feels like... this didn't even have as much atmosphere as this, but it's kind of like the opening of, say, King Kong when they're all getting the ship to go to the island or something like that, but a bit more just eerie, a bit more... The tone's just a bit more dark. And he's introduced to the squad that he's going with, this team of Morningstar troops that are all specialists in some ways. But he goes with them. But once he's on the boat, a couple of things happen to end the issue. Pearl gets a letter saying my girl Pearl, and it's all romantic. It's like, oh, he's left me a note, but it's actually from Skinner saying that because this is the key thing, is that Henry never told her who the mission was for. He never told her that he was going on a mission to fight vampires. He just said that he was in a platoon for a job, for something that was normal. He never actually said that that's who he was fighting for, or he was going to fight vampires. And Skinner sends a letter here saying, he's lying to you, but I'm going to punish him for both of us. Love, Skinner, sweet. So she's in shock at this, and then it's just at that moment in the last page that Skinner is revealed to be on the squad. Or he's at least on the boat and like gear that looks like he's on the squad.
He's on the cover, I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the cliffhanger. So... It's I think this is a really solid issue. Like, I like the elements of the last issue, but this one, it really builds this idea of where is Skinner Sweet and the dread of him, because the opening couple of pages refers to him being involved, but then the issue goes without his presence, and you're kind of waiting for it. But you also have this idea, because the issue starts with Henry on the island writing to Pearl because he thinks he's going to die. It sets up this tone, this mood of impending doom. And then, we have the stuff with him and Pearl, and it's fine, and it feels like he's a bit agitated, there's stuff going on. But because we know where it's kind of leading to, and it's kind of what the effect you're supposed to have when you have this kind of starting at the end and flashing back, is that when it does get to that full page spread of the boat, this 2-page spread of the boat in the mist, and him like loading them to the boat, it does kind of feel like he's going off to die. It feels like, like there might not be any coming back from this, and it's added to a lot. A, from the art, but B, because of that opening, because like it sets us up thinking that he's not coming back. Now, I don't remember the end of this arc. I don't remember if he does come back from this, but it definitely doesn't feel like he is at this point in the story.
It wants to play like it's not. Is it back to Albuquerque in the art now?
Yeah, Albuquerque's back on the art, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if you'd said that or not already. I wasn't paying attention, to be honest. But that probably helps with the tone, right?
Oh, for sure. But it has a very distinct atmosphere, this one. Very different feeling. And it's been very, because even though it's Albuquerque again, it feels very different to the first arc, which was all the glitz of Hollywood, but with these really dark vampire creatures kind of in silhouette constantly, like, being these monsters and the big fangs, lots of blood. There's not a lot of blood in this. It's all eerie. It's all more low beat. It's a lot more down, low key and just kind of brooding, I suppose, in tone. And then even the second arc, which was, again, it was in Vegas. It was all mob stuff. It was all like, the book's done a really good job, despite the fact that we're coming back to a relative small group of revolving characters. It's done a very good job of making each arc feel like it's a different genre almost, or at the very least a very different setting, if not a different genre. But even this, the idea that we're doing like almost like an Aliens Colonial Marines thing, where we're like, okay, we've got a squad and we're going to go and hunt a nest of vampires. Like, even that is a very distinct visual or a storytelling like setting that the book's not done yet. It's done the old Western kind of thing with the backstory. It's done the even again Western again with the whole crime boss stuff, but a more sort of traditional Western sort of thing with the various bosses in the town. It's done these different things. So
now you're starting to move into war stories, essentially.
Kind of, yeah. So now I'm looking forward to more of this, because I know the mini that comes after this arc is also very war set.
Which one's that?
I can't remember the titles. Which ones were what?
A couple of Survival of the Fittest as well.
That may be the first one, yeah, maybe that one. But so I think the mood from this and the impending doom is kind of the two things that really stuck out to me in this one, and it's kind of what you want from a horror comic, I guess, more than anything. But it's a really good issue. So solid 8.5 for me on this one. So that's American Vampire 13. But that'll take us on to the part of the show where we pick our favourite stuff of the week, favourite panel / moment, favourite art, favourite cover, and top 5 books of which we have. And we will count Justice League in this, I think, just since we did it in the show today, even though it was last week's book. So this panel / moment.
For me, that would be the final page of Hawkman, that reveal of where and when they are, and just the implications of that. They made me pop. It's pretty good.
I hate them, but I kind of want to pick some stuff from Punchline, because I think that from a storytelling perspective, it's the most interesting thing this week. But I'm going to have to go with Bruce saying fart.
How old are you?
It was I don't know. I think that's what made it funny, though. That's what Lobo thinks a kid just says fart, unprompted. Like,
probably
just really made me laugh. So yeah, that's my pick. Cover of the week.
Do you know what? I was looking through them. The Superman variant is quite nice. That's Tony Daniel. It's pretty nice. I went to look at all the Punchline variants, and there was about 30 of them, and went, nah, I'm good. I'm not even going to bother.
I was skimming them whilst you were talking about Hawkman, so I do have some thoughts on a couple. The choices I had were basically the Wonder Woman variant, which is very pretty.
I haven't looked at the Wonder Woman one. Why did I not see the Wonder Woman one?
The Hawkman variant, I think, is kind of nice. But I think I will go with one of the Punchline ones. I think I'm going to go with the Shannon Mayer variant, which is just pretty. It's got the lightning behind her.
The lightning.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see it. I'm looking. That's quite nice.
That's pretty nice. There's a few solid ones in there. There's a lot of variants for it. So I think that's my pick overall. But I wanted to mention those other ones.
I think for me, it ultimately comes down to either that Wonder Woman variant, which I'm assuming is a Middleton one. It looks Middleton-esque. Yeah, it is. Or the Hawkman main cover. That Yanning cover is real nice. Which I think I'm going to give it to Hawkman. And I will admit part of that is that I'm not going to get to choose Hawkman again after this, and there will absolutely be more Middleton variants in the future that I will absolutely pick because I'm a sucker for them. So yeah, I'll go with Hawkman.
All right, best art.
That's kind of a tough one. It's either Hawkman or Wonder Woman, I think, for me. I think I'll go with Hawkman. It's a bit more expressive.
Yeah, Wonder Woman's good. Punchline's not bad. I don't have an obvious pick for this.
I didn't either. It's not like there's no standout art this week, even though there's a lot of pretty good art.
If I could pick American Vampire, I would, but I probably Superman, actually. Ivan Reis.
Ivan Reis is pretty solid.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I don't personally consider Ivan Reis to be a standout artist, but I think he's a very good artist. And I think that's kind of where I'm falling on a lot of art this week. Is there's a lot of pretty good, and maybe Ivan Reis would fall into very good, admittedly, which is slightly above, but in the same kind of ballpark. I don't think there's any art this week that really disappointed me, that was really bad.
I don't have any strong feelings on it, though, so it's more of just a gut feeling than anything else. What's your top 5?
Well, unsurprisingly, Hawkman is number 1, with quite a gaping chasm after that, let's be honest. It's probably Justice League after that. And then the death metal thing, whatever that was, Infinite Hour Exxxtreme. And then Wonder Woman, and then Flash, I guess, assuming I need that many.
My number 1's probably Punchline. It's just the most interesting.
It's a weird one.
For all its faults, because
I feel like from its ideas and what it's doing, I probably quite like its ideas more than I do some of the books I did actually finish.
Yeah, Punchline at number 1, number 2. Yeah, probably Justice League. Number 3.
Didn't you give Superman a 7?
Didn't I give Justice League a 7?
Maybe you did. I thought you gave it a little bit lower. Fair enough. I think give it a 6.5. Maybe I'm misremembering.
Just roll with it. Just roll with it.
Fine.
Punchline, then Justice League, and then yeah, Superman, Infinite Hour Exxxtreme, Wonder Woman.
Was that 5?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I read 6, and Flash was the only one I didn't mention, which quite rarely. There you go. That's the picks of the week, which means I'll tell you what's coming next week from the Detective Comics. That is Batman 103, Justice League 57, Nightwing 76, Dark Knight's Death Metal issue 5, so the next main chapter, which is exciting. Aquaman 65.
Is that the final issue of that, or is there one more after?
I can't remember.
Because I can't remember if the last one's tying into Winter's End. Endless Winter, whatever it's called.
Yeah. Teen Titans 47, Catwoman 27, Rorschach number 2, Joker Harley Criminal Sanity number 6, and that's basically it. So, yeah.
I will give DC a little bit of credit for the smallest possible things, but I do like is because I noticed on Hawkman this week, and it's also on the Teen Titans next week. They slap a big final issue thing on the cover to make it very clear. I guess that's a thing they're doing now. So no mistaking it. I like that.
Okay. There you go. That's what's coming next week. I'll tell you right now about our Patreon producers and thank them because they are great. So thank you to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palisades, David Sharp, Board Now, Al Treisman, Christopher Moy, Brett Williams, and David Brown. They are our Patreon producers for the month, which means they are $20 or more on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, which you can go and check yourself. You can support us over there for as little as $1 per month, and that is a huge help. It is more than we would make if you watched the ads on everything we put out on MailFuzzTV, not just comments from the Multiverse every month on YouTube. But if you can't give us money, that's cool too. You can also hit the like button. Liking is super important and helps us out a lot because it leads us to more audience members. We get in front of more eyes because of the old dreaded YouTube algorithm. Similar idea for rating the podcast on iTunes, like 5 stars and giving it a review. Similar thing, we appear on top lists, we get recommended more often. So please do any of those things because they're all very helpful. You can also follow us on Twitter at DC Comics Podcast for random updates and various other things, and to ask questions and whatnot. Email us mftvquestions@gmail.com if you want to say there's a big question that we can use on a question episode, which won't be next week, but can be used for any time. And that's pretty much everything I have to tell you, I think, unless something's escaping my mind. But otherwise, that has been episode 227 of Comics from the Multiverse. Can you believe it? We're a quarter of the way into the next 100 already.
I know.
It'll be 300 before we know it.
Joe, I kind of had a moment the other day where I'm like, Jesus Christ, it's November. It's like mid-November already. What happened to this year? And then I'm like, oh yeah, that happened to this year.
Yeah, it's been a weird one. I made an appointment for an eye test yesterday, and I'd been meaning to do it for a little while and just kept kind of forgetting. And I'm annoyed that I was forgetting because when I went to set it up, like it's literally a month wait time because of like
oh boy, yeah.
how spread out the appointments are.
I haven't had an eye test since before I left home, so I don't know. We're looking at 7 years at least, 8 years maybe minimum.
Yeah, probably recommend it. There's a lot of.
I probably should, but you have to pay for them.
Well, you have to pay for them. I don't.
Well, screw you.
Scotland's free healthcare is even better than England's free healthcare.
No, it is in a couple of ways as well. I think with prescriptions you pay less than we do.
They're free.
All of it, yeah. We see ours are a flat fee, but there are some times where it's cheaper to not use your prescription and just order the thing off the shelf.
That said, I am paying for the OCT scan, which was an optional thing, but it's highly recommended if you're over 25.
What's an OCT scan?
It's an extra little scan thing they do when you go for an eye test, but it detects a couple of things. It takes like a photo of the back of your eye, and it's good because it can detect if you've got a couple of different conditions and can actually be the early warning sign of like a tumor or things like that. So it's just a good idea to do it when you go for an eye test.
I mean, to be honest, Paige keeps telling me I should go get an eye test. I'm like, I don't want to pay for it. And like once a year or so, we get like a leaflet through the door going, hey, come to this particular Specsavers and we'll give you a free eye test. And the last one came about 3 weeks before we went into lockdown. I was like, okay, fine, I'll go do it this time. And then everything happened. So yeah, maybe next year.
So I paid a little bit for that extra thing, but it's not much. So there you go. Everyone's updated on the state of my eye care.
Yeah.
There we go. So expect some new glasses probably. Well, it depends how. Maybe it may take longer to fulfill the orders now, so maybe it won't be too quick. Usually it's only a couple of days after you go for a test. Maybe it'll be longer now, but.
I'd have thought the production and manufacturing side of things is still going pretty smoothly, so you might be okay on that side. It's just getting into the appointment that might take a while.
Yeah, you would think. But yeah. All right, so there you go. That's the show. That's 227. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep reading DC Comics, and remember to never get lost in the Speed Force.